Chapter 1627. Unknowingly, more than a month had passed. 50 days had passed in the outside world, but Ji Tianqing had been cultivating in the secret chamber for more than 8 months. After this period of seclusion, his strength had advanced by leaps and bounds, increasing by 2 times. He had already cultivated the 4th level of the Sword Soul Dao to the greater success stage, and his primordial spirit was extremely powerful. His strength had reached the peak of the 7th level of the primordial spirit realm. As long as he broke through a bottleneck, he would be able to step into the 8th level of the primordial spirit realm. At that time, he would truly be invincible under the tribulation stage. Originally, he wanted to cultivate in seclusion in the secret chamber and strive to break through the bottleneck. He wanted to reach the 8th level of the primordial spirit realm before leaving Sacred Seal Mountain. However, someone knocked on the door of the secret chamber early in the morning. Ji Tianqing was awakened. After finishing his cultivation and walking out of the secret chamber, he realized that the person knocking on the door was a guard from the East Court. The golden-armored guard bowed respectfully and handed over a jade slip with both hands. "Young Master Ji, this is a communication jade slip for you. Before your seclusion, you instructed me to wake you up if I received this jade slip." Ji Tianqing took the communication jade slip and looked at it. He saw a mysterious imprint on it. In the imprint, there was a towering mountain peak, like a giant sword that stood between heaven and earth. On top of the mountain peak, there was a vast sea of clouds, and a bright moon hung in the sky. Back then, the identity token that Ji Bai took out had such an imprint on it, representing the pillar of heaven's mountains. Ji Tianqing waved his hand, indicating for the guard to leave. Then, he used his consciousness to enter the jade slip and read the message inside. "Master, this subordinate awaits your arrival in Xueqi City. There is an elder who wishes to meet you. Please come and meet him." There was only one sentence in the jade slip. It was concise and to the point, just like Ji Bai's tone and style. Back then, when Ji Tianqing returned to Sacred Seal Mountain from the Glacier Divine Mine, he had asked Ji Bai to wait at the foot of the mountain. The two of them had agreed that if there was anything important, they would communicate through the jade slip. Ji Bai, this fellow, actually ran to Xueqi City? An elder of his wants to meet me? What elder? Could it be a descendant of the Pillar of Heaven's Mountains? Ji Tianqing put away the jade slip, frowned and pondered for a moment. Then he made up his mind. He walked out of the Heaven Saint Palace East Courtyard and left the God-Sealing Mountain, rushing towards Xueqi City at lightning speed. Xueqi City was the closest bustling city to Mount God Bestowment. The distance between the two was more than 10,000 kilometers. At such a close distance, Ji Tianqing only used 2 hours to reach the city gates of Xueqi City. Xueqi City was situated in the middle of a mountain range, atop a towering mountain peak that was over 3,000 meters tall. This city had a radius of 100 miles and had a history of over 2,000 years. The black city walls and the majestic city gates exuded an ancient aura. Ji Tianqing passed through the heavily guarded city gate and was inspected by the city guards. He paid a few spirit stones before he was allowed to enter the city. As soon as he entered the city, he walked on a straight and wide road. At this moment, a young man dressed in cotton clothes and wearing a bamboo hat quickly caught up with him. "Master, please come with me." Hearing this familiar voice, Ji Tianqing turned his head and saw an unfamiliar face under the bamboo hat. On the surface, the face was dark yellow, like an ordinary person or a woodcutter. However, Ji Tianqing recognized that pair of deep and sharp eyes. It was Ji Bai. "Heh, you still want to disguise yourself? Why are you so mysterious?" Ji Tianqing revealed a smile and communicated with him through voice transmission. Ji Bai led him into a small alley. As they shuttled through the complicated alleys, he explained, "We, the people of the Pillar of Heaven's Mountains, always pay attention to concealment and concealment. Otherwise, it would be very difficult for us to survive until today." Ji Tianqing frowned and asked doubtfully, "Ji Bai, what do you mean? Could it be that there are some experts and forces that have been dealing with the people of the Pillar of Heaven's Mountains? This matter you will naturally know in the future." Ji Bai replied. Obviously, he did not dare to reveal any information. Not long after, the two of them came to the end of a dark and damp alley and entered an old house. The house was not big. The courtyard and the layout of the house were ordinary and did not attract any attention. It was probably because the house had been empty for too many years that weeds grew in the courtyard. After years of disrepair, The roof tiles were broken and some places even leaked water. Ji Bai brought Ji Tianqing into a simple and unadorned study. The door was half closed. A thin white-haired old man wearing a black robe was standing in front of the window, quietly looking at the flower bed outside. The old man's back was facing the door of the study. Only his thin back and long white hair could be seen. Ji Bai entered the study and stood still. He respectfully bowed and said, "Fourth elder, I have brought the guest." The black-robed old man had probably been waiting for a long time. When he heard this, he immediately turned around and looked at Ji Tianqing with a burning gaze. He did not open his mouth to speak. His pair of bright eyes stared at Ji Tianqing. He actually lost his mind and stood there blankly. However, his face was covered by a black iron mask. His expression could not be seen. Ji Tianqing was also silent. He quietly looked at him. After a long time, the black-robed old man came back to his senses. He emotionally sighed and said, "Similar. Really too similar. If not for this old man's mental preparation, I'm afraid that this old man would have personally come." His voice was trembling. His eyes were complicated. There was a bit of nostalgia, reminiscence and sadness. Seeing his reaction, Ji Tianqing could vaguely guess the reason. Soon after, the black-robed old man calmed his emotions. He cupped his hands towards Ji Tianqing and said, "This old man, Feng Ping, greets young Master Ji." Ji Tianqing nodded his head and cupped his hands. "Elder Feng is too polite. Young Master Ji, please sit down and talk." Feng Ping extended his hand and gestured for him to sit. After Ji Tianqing sat down, Ji Bai stood guard by his side. At this time, Feng Ping added, "Young Master Ji, you should still call this old man Fourth Elder." Ji Tianqing nodded and said, "Fourth Elder, everyone here is on the same side. Can you take off your mask and show your true face?" Feng Ping was startled. He hurriedly took off the mask on his face and laughed self-mockingly. This old man lost his composure for a moment. "I've made a fool of myself in front of young Master Ji." After he took off the mask, a weather-beaten face with an aura of vicissitudes was revealed. Ji Tianqing could clearly see that there was a deep scar on his forehead and the left side of his face. It was like a scar that was cut by a sharp blade. Even so, Feng Ping's face did not show any malevolence. There was still some gentleness and benevolence. After the two exchanged a few pleasantries, Feng Ping began to talk business. "Young Master Ji, this old man came to Xueqi City on the orders of the Great Immortal to discuss some matters with you face to face. This old man knows that you possess the Sword of Burial of Heaven. It seems that you have also inherited the Sword Dao legacy of the Great Immortal." Chapter 1628. Ji Tianqing did not expect Francis to be so direct. The two of them had never met before, and Francis wanted to see the Sword of Burial of Heaven the moment they met. This request was obviously a little abrupt. Ji Tianqing frowned and said calmly, "Fourth Elder, I understand what you mean. You want to confirm whether I have the real Sword of Burial of Heaven. However, the Sword of Burial of Heaven is Kenshin's sword and has been missing for thousands of years. Forgive me for being blunt, but even if I take out the Sword of Burial of Heaven and show it to you, how can you tell whether it is real or fake? What's the difference between seeing it and not seeing it?" Francis's request was rejected, but he was not angry and still maintained a pleasant attitude. He revealed a smile and explained sincerely, "Young Master Ji, the great deity naturally has his reasons for sending me here. More than 1,000 years ago, the Grand Master sat at the Pillar of Heaven's mountains and challenged all the martial saints in the world. At that time, there were not many people who followed the Grand Master, only the great deity and a few martial uncles. Fortunately, I was also on the Pillar of Heaven's mountains back then. Although I was only a Taoist child then, helping the great deity to look after the great deity's furnace fire. However, I have seen the Grand Master many times and have seen the Sword of Burial of Heaven with my own eyes many times." Hearing Francis's words, Ji Tianqing raised his eyebrows and asked with interest, "May I ask how old you are, Fourth Elder?" 1,558 years old. Francis replied without any hesitation. Ji Tianqing frowned slightly. He thought for a while and realized that the facts were basically the same. However, to be safe, he still used his divine thought and secretly awakened the Sword of Burial of Heaven. The Sword of Burial of Heaven. You should have seen this Francis before. Do you still remember him? The Sword of Burial of Heaven said calmly, "After more than 1,000 years, my memories are incomplete. How can I remember these unimportant people? Ji Tianqing was full of helplessness, but he couldn't force anything. At this moment, Francis looked at him with a burning gaze and said sincerely, "Young Master Ji, don't worry. This old man and the entire Pillar of Heaven's mountains have no ill intentions towards you. Kenshin is our spiritual leader, our eternal ancestor. This old man only wishes to take a look at Grandmaster's remains and complete the task that the Great Immortal has given me. I hope that young Master Ji can fulfill my wish." Seeing that Francis' tone and expression were filled with sincerity and desire, Ji Tianqing considered for a moment before finally nodding his head in agreement. "I can show you, but you have to tell me first, who is this Great Immortal you're talking about?" Without hesitation, Francis answered, 1,500 years ago, the Great Immortal's Taoist name was Huanglong Taoist. He had always been by his Grandmaster's side, managing the matters of the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. 1,000 years ago, after the fall of the martial ancestor, the world was shaken. Many thieves took the opportunity to invade the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. The Pillar of Heaven's mountains suffered a great calamity. A few uncle masters and the experts in the sect all died in battle. Only the Great Immortal Huanglong and the few of us survived. From then on, the Great Immortal became our leader, leading us to protect the last legacy of the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. The Great Immortal once said that the Great Immortal was the divine king of the 9 heavens and could not truly fall. There will be a day when the Great Immortal returns and reappears in the world. Ji Tianqing listened attentively, and some images involuntarily appeared in his mind. In his memory, when Kenshin was overseeing the Pillar of Heaven's mountains, there was a middle-aged Taoist wearing an apricot-yellow Taoist robe beside him. Now that he thought about it, that yellow-robed Taoist should be the Great Immortal Huanglong that Francis mentioned. After a moment, Ji Tianqing collected his thoughts and extended his right palm in front of Francis. Swoosh! A black light flashed in his palm, and an ancient sword that was as black as ink appeared. It was the Sword of Burial of Heaven. The moment Francis saw the Sword of Burial of Heaven, his body stiffened and he was stunned on the spot. His eyes were fixed on the Heaven Burial sword. His eyes were shining brightly, and the rims of his eyes turned red. His gaze and expression became extremely complicated as his emotions fluctuated violently. It is indeed the Sword of Burial of Heaven. After more than 1,000 years, I can still see it with my own eyes. I can die with no regrets. Francis murmured softly as he extended both hands slowly, and held the Sword of Burial of Heaven in his palms. He rubbed it gently as though he was greeting an old friend. I still remember that I was still a boy guarding the elixir furnace back then. There was once when the Great Immortal was refining the 7-night soul ascension elixir, and needed to maintain the fire in the furnace for 49 days. I persisted for 46 days and finally could not hold on any longer. I actually fainted in the elixir chamber. Francis mumbled to himself as he recounted the past. On his aged face, a faint smile could be seen. That cauldron of 7-night soul ascension elixir was destroyed. The Great Immortal was furious and wanted to severely punish me, a derelict Tao boy. At the crucial moment, it was the Sword of Burial of Heaven that stopped the Great Immortal and sent him away, allowing me to avoid punishment. When he said this, the Sword of Burial of Heaven vibrated slightly and bounced his hands away. The voice of the Sword of Burial of Heaven came from the sword. It said with a strange tone, "Little one, after more than 1,000 years, you actually still remember this small matter? Even if you want to thank me, you don't have to hold me so intimately. Where is your decency?" The sudden voice made Francis's body tremble and he was immediately petrified on the spot. He stared at the Sword of Burial of Heaven in a daze. His eyes were wide open and his face was filled with disbelief. After a long while, he recovered and asked in an extremely agitated tone, "Senior Burial of Heaven? Is it really you? You're actually still alive?" He was so agitated that his face flushed red. He rubbed his hands repeatedly and even spoke incoherently. Ji Tianqing glanced at Francis with a strange expression and thought to himself, "Little one? An old man who has lived for more than 1,000 years? Isn't this a little too out of place?" However, after thinking for a while, he felt relieved. Back then, when Francis was a Tao boy on the Pillar of Heaven's mountains, he was only a little over 10 years old. To the Sword of Burial of Heaven, he was indeed a little one. At this moment, the voice of the Sword of Burial of Heaven sounded again. "Xiao Budian, have your martial uncles all passed away?" Francis took a few deep breaths before his emotions calmed down.
He hurriedly nodded and said, "Other than the great immortal yellow dragon, those martial uncles have all died in battle. Now, only the great immortal is leading us and guarding the pillar of heaven's mountains." The sword of burial of heaven was silent for a moment and said in a low and vigorous tone, "It's all right.
One day, the pillar of heaven's mountains will regain its glory. Those who had once invaded the pillar of heaven's mountains will pay the price in blood." Francis nodded repeatedly, his eyes surging with excitement and anticipation.
He said in a certain tone, "Senior burial of heaven, I also believe that that day will come very soon."
The sword of burial of heaven instructed again in a solemn tone, "Go back and tell Huang Long that Ji Tianqing is the successor of the Kenshin and also the new owner of the Pillar of Heaven's Mountains. Only he can lead everyone to take revenge for all the grievances and hatred back then. No matter what, you have to protect him and help him return to the peak as soon as possible and regain the glory of the Kenshin." Chapter 1629. After instructing Francis, the burial of heaven went silent. Ji Tianqing knew that it had fallen into a deep slumber, so he put the burial of heaven away. Francis reluctantly watched the burial of heaven disappear, wanting to take a few more glances. However, he understood that Ji Tianqing was willing to show him the burial of heaven, which was already very rare. If he wanted to observe it for a while longer, he would be too tactless. After Ji Tianqing put away the burial of heaven, he calmly looked at Francis and asked, "Fourth Elder, do you have any other questions?"
Francis hurriedly shook his head and said with an amiable expression, "Young Master Ji, there are no more questions.
This old man's mission has been completed, so I can go back with a peace of mind. If I have offended you in any way, I hope that young Master Ji can forgive me." "You're too polite." Ji Tianqing slightly nodded, and said politely. Francis looked at Ji Bai and said in a dignified tone, "Ji Bai, from now on, you will follow young Master Ji like a shadow. No matter what, even if you have to sacrifice your life, you must protect him." Ji Bai had personally witnessed the conversation between Francis and the burial of heaven, so he knew Ji Tianqing's identity and position.
He did not hesitate to bow and accept the order and said, "As you wish." Francis nodded in satisfaction and continued, "In addition, this old man came to Xueqi City this time. Great deity also sent Xueqi with me.
Ji Bai, you will protect young Master Ji in the open, and Xueqi will protect him in the dark. The two of you must work together." Hearing the name Xueqi, Ji Tianqing and Ji Bai were startled. Ji Tianqing raised his eyebrows and thought to himself, "I didn't expect that other than Ji Bai, there would be someone called Xueqi. I wonder if this Xueqi is Ji Bai's brother, or senior brother." Ji Bai's expression stiffened, and he frowned.
However, he quickly returned to normal, and expressionlessly nodded. "This disciple understands. Please be at ease, Fourth Elder."
Francis slowly stood up, preparing to bid farewell to Ji Tianqing. At this time, Ji Tianqing suddenly thought of something and said to him, "Fourth Elder, please wait for a moment. I have something to ask you." "Young Master Ji, please speak." Francis cupped his hands in greeting, showing that he was all ears. Ji Tianqing said with a dignified expression, "I wonder if Fourth Elder has heard of the demon race?" "Demon race?" Francis furrowed his brows, as a puzzled look appeared on his face. Ji Tianqing thought that he had never heard of it and was a little disappointed. He explained, "A few months ago, more than 10,000 miners and divine servants died in the glacial divine mine in the Arctic abyss. Those people were sucked dry of their blood, energy, and souls. They died in a miserable state, as if they were dried corpses that had been burned by fire. I went to investigate and killed 2 blood gods. In the end, I ran into a ghost child covered in ghost tattoos. Ghost child claimed to be one of the 36 demon monarchs and worked for the ancestral demon god. You should know that Kenshin was mortal enemies with the demon race when he was alive. I inherited Kenshin's will, and I am absolutely irreconcilable with the demon race. I swore to exterminate the demon race and kill the ancestral demon god." When he heard Ji Tianqing's words, Francis's eyes lit up, and he nodded repeatedly. "I understand now. Young Master Ji, the demon race that you speak of is actually called the ghost race. They have sinister and ugly appearances, and they possess many cruel, bloody, and evil secret techniques. They also use various evil altars to create world-destroying plagues and disasters. On Xinwu continent, all the martial artists hate and fear the ghost race. It is said that before the ancient era, the ghost race once wreaked havoc on Xueqi continent and killed countless people. Ji Tianqing immediately revealed a look of realization, and he nodded repeatedly. No wonder I couldn't find any information about the demon race when I was flipping through the ancient books. I never thought that they would be called the ghost race on Xueqi continent. Although their name has changed, and their appearance are different from the demon races, they are still fundamentally the same. After he finished speaking, he looked expectantly at Francis and asked, "Fourth Elder, how much do you know about the ghost race?" Francis frowned and replied with a grave expression, "I'm not very familiar with the ghost race, but I do know a lot of information. The ghost race is not tolerated by any of the other races, and they have lived in seclusion in Dark North Mountain for generations. It is an incomparably vast region that is about half the size of the Azure Dragon Empire. The environment in Dark North Mountain is harsh and incomparably dangerous. It is an infamous forbidden area on the continent, and ordinary people do not dare to approach it. It is said that the ghost race is divided into 36 powers in Dark North Mountain, and they have hundreds of millions of citizens. They also control many evil demons and giant beasts. The leaders of these 36 powers are known as the Demon Lords. Above the Demon Lords are 2 great demon saints, and they seem to be the strongest in Dark North Mountain." Ji Tianqing listened attentively, and his eyes flickered with a cold light. He roughly guessed that the ancestor fiend god was most likely hiding in Dark North Mountain. With the protection of hundreds of millions of demons, 36 demon lords, and 2 great demon saints, the ancestor fiend god would be able to sit back and relax, and quickly recover his strength. Thinking of this, Ji Tianqing's heart felt like it was pierced by a thorn. At this time, Francis continued, 1,000 years ago, when the news of the ancestor's death spread, the ghost race was among the invaders of the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. One of my martial uncles was killed by a demon saint, and not even a complete corpse was left. I saw with my own eyes that my martial uncle's flesh and blood turned into a bloody mist, and was devoured by that demon saint." Speaking of the past, Francis's eyes surged with hatred, and his tone became low and cold. Ji Tianqing nodded and consoled him with a heavy tone. "Fourth Elder, don't worry, we will get our revenge sooner or later. One day, I will purge Dark North Mountain, and kill hundreds of millions of demons." Francis nodded solemnly and said, "Young Master Ji, I believe in you, and I also look forward to that day." After that, the 2 of them chatted for a while. Francis stood up and cupped his hands towards Ji Tianqing, and said, "Young Master Ji, your time is precious, so I won't delay you any longer. I will take my leave now, and report back to the Great Immortal. Take care, I won't send you off." Ji Tianqing cupped his hands in return. Francis was very decisive, and he took out the black iron mask and put it on his face, and his figure flashed out of the study. The study quieted down, and only Ji Tianqing and Ji Bai remained. Ji Tianqing walked out of the door and said, "Ji Bai, we should also go back." Ji Bai silently nodded his head and followed behind him. After a quarter of an hour, the 2 of them left Xueqi City. Facing the yellow afternoon sun, the 2 of them flew across the sky, and returned to God Bestowment Mountain. Ji Bai, as usual, remained calm and alert, vigilantly monitoring the surroundings. Ji Tianqing, on the other hand, was much more relaxed. While flying high in the sky, he was also silently thinking about the conversation between the burial of Heaven and Francis. Half an hour later, the 2 of them were flying over a vast primitive forest. Suddenly, from the 2 mountain peaks to the side, several dazzling lights lit up, and rushed over as fast as lightning. Chapter 1630. When the 6 black-robed martial artists flew over from the 2 sides of the mountain, Ji Tianqing and Ji Bai immediately sensed that something was wrong. Although the 2 of them did not know the identity of the black-robed martial artists. But they could clearly feel that the black-robed martial artists were full of murderous intent, and they were coming menacingly. "Master, be careful." Ji Bai's expression suddenly became dignified, and the nerves in his body tensed up, as if he was facing a great enemy. A black light flashed in his palm, and the black treasured saber appeared. He held the treasured saber with both hands, and stared at the black-robed martial artists with a fierce gaze. His body crazily accumulated a vast amount of Fa Li. However, just as he was preparing to fight, Ji Tianqing's voice sounded in his mind. "Don't be impulsive, retreat first." As he spoke, Ji Tianqing pulled him and quickly retreated. In just a few breaths, the 2 of them retreated 100 miles away. At this time, the 6 black-robed martial artists spread out, and launched a pincer attack from the left and right, and rushed over aggressively. Ji Bai protected Ji Tianqing as they retreated, and asked, "Master, why don't we take advantage of the fact that they haven't surrounded us and kill our way out?" Although the 6 black-robed martial artists were all Tribulation Realm experts, but their strength was between the 2nd and 4th level of the Tribulation Realm. If Ji Tianqing and Ji Bai attacked unexpectedly, it was very likely that they would tear open a gap and escape the encirclement before the other party could launch a siege. Ji Tianqing shook his head and explained with a dignified expression, "This group of black-robed martial artists is coming for me, and obviously it was premeditated. They must have set up an ambush in front. Even if we force our way out and break through the encirclement of the 6 black-robed martial artists, we will still fall into the other party's ambush." Hearing him say this, Ji Bai revealed a look of understanding. He turned his head to look at the sky behind him, and saw that over 100 miles away, in the sky above the forest, there were indeed 4 black-robed martial artists. A total of 10 black-robed martial artists rushed over as fast as lightning, and launched an encirclement. This scene had indeed verified Ji Tianqing's conjecture. Ji Bai revealed a look of admiration as he thought to himself, "Master is wise enough to see through the other party's plot in a flash." Luckily, Ji Tianqing retreated decisively and did not fall into the encirclement of the black-clothed martial artists. His flying speed was fast enough. Bringing Ji Bai with him, he retreated 200 miles away, pulling away from the 10 black-clothed martial artists. However, at this moment, an earth-shaking roar came from the forest in front of them. Roar! A deafening roar of a beast reverberated in the air above the forest and the mountains. Then, a dark red ferocious beast flew out of the forest and blocked their path. It was a monstrous giant ape that was over 300 meters tall and covered in red fur. It had 2 heads and 4 arms, and a wide bloody mouth. It even had a pair of wide wings, and its entire body was covered in scarlet flames, emitting an incomparably violent aura. Ji Tianqing and Ji Bai could clearly see that between the 2 heads of the giant ape, there was a middle-aged man wearing a red robe and a crystal skull mask. Roar! The giant ape roared like a large bell, opening its 3-meter-wide bloody mouth, revealing 2 rows of messy sharp fangs. Endless dark red flames spewed out from its big mouth, like a monstrous flood, pouring down from the sky. Suddenly, the sky was shrouded in flames, and half of the sky was illuminated in dark red like blood. Ji Tianqing and Ji Bai's faces changed, and their eyes flashed with anger. Damn it! There was actually an ambush here. There are ambushes in front, behind, left, and right. The other party is determined to win. As they spoke, the 2 of them used teleportation to escape to the left and right, and condensed a magic shield to protect themselves. Unfortunately, their speed was still too slow, and they were swept up by the dark red flames. Bang bang! Following 2 muffled booms, the 2 of them were sent flying thousands of feet away by the dark red flames. When the 2 of them got rid of the impact and stood steadily in the sky, the situation had changed. There was a 2-headed giant ape in front of them, and there were 10 black-clothed warriors chasing after them. Ji Tianqing and Ji Bai were surrounded, and they couldn't escape even if they had wings. Both sides stopped in the sky, and didn't make a move for the time being, facing each other with murderous intent. Ji Tianqing looked at the red-robed man on the 2-headed giant ape, and asked coldly, "Which force are you from? Openly intercepting a god's disciple of Mount God, aren't you afraid of being punished by Mount God?" The red-robed man looked down at Ji Tianqing, and under the crystal skull mask, only a pair of cold eyes could be seen. "No matter who you are, today you will die without a doubt. If you know what's good for you, you should surrender. Otherwise, I don't mind turning you into ashes." The red-robed man's tone was cold and domineering, and it was full of unquestionable meaning. While he was speaking, Ji Bai held his treasured sword and silently guarded Ji Tianqing. Ji Bai looked at the red-robed man and the 10 black-clothed warriors fiercely, trying to determine the identity and origin of the other party through some clues. However, the black-clothed warriors and the red-robed man didn't have any identity symbols or badges on them. Ji Tianqing thought of something, and the corner of his mouth hooked up into a mocking sneer. He said to the red-robed man, "Ever since I gave the divine sword to Emperor Chu Yun, the experts of the major empires no longer paid attention to me, and were busy dealing with the Chu Yun Empire. Calculating the time, that idiot Emperor Chu Yun should have seen through the authenticity of the divine sword. If I'm not wrong, you are that idiot's lackeys, right?"
The red-robed man's body suddenly trembled, and his eyes burst out with a fierce cold light, revealing an angry murderous intent.
Boy, you dare to insult the Holy Emperor. You deserve to die. Today, I will cut you into pieces, and turn you into ashes. Kill him. Following the red-robed man's order, the 10 black-clothed warriors all waved their swords, and slashed out an earth-shattering saber light and sword light, besieging Ji Tianqing and Ji Bai. The two-headed giant ape also roared furiously, waving its 4 thick and sturdy arms, and blasted out dozens of dark red flames, smashing towards Ji Tianqing. Suddenly, the sky within 100 miles was covered by the brilliance of spells, becoming dazzling and chaotic. The red-robed man's reaction made Ji Tianqing and Ji Bai certain that this group of people were assassins under Emperor Chu Yun. However, it was useless even if they knew the other party's identity. The most important thing now was to kill their way out of the encirclement, and then find a way to get rid of these assassins. Ji Bai rushed out with a cold face, waving his treasured sword without fear, and slashing out a sky full of saber light. Swish, swish, swish. The dazzling saber light crisscrossed the sky, forming a huge saber net, protecting him and Ji Tianqing. Ji Tianqing also took out the sword of burial of heaven, and used all of his strength, slashing out 1,000-long sword light, sweeping towards the black-clothed warriors. Chapter 1631. Boom, boom, boom. Deafening noises exploded one after another, fiercely reverberating in the sky. The sky full of saber light and sword shadows collided fiercely, collapsing one after another, turning into hundreds of millions of light fragments, sprinkling in the sky like raindrops. The violent and devastating shockwaves, like circles of colorful ripples, spread in all directions. Within 100 miles, it was turbid chaos. A large area of the primitive forest was destroyed into ruins by the shockwaves. A few thousand feet tall mountains were also shattered by the shockwaves, collapsing into a pile of gravel and yellow soil. The first round of confrontation between the two sides only lasted for 2 breaths before it ended. Ji Tianqing and Ji Bai were shaken to the point that their bodies trembled, their faces were pale, and the corners of their mouths overflowed with blood. 10 Tribulation Realm black-clothed martial artists, plus a 4th-layer Tribulation Realm 2-headed giant ape. The attack was fierce to the extreme. With their strength, it was impossible for them to resist head-on. Swish! Ji Bai endured his injuries and flew to Ji Tianqing's side as fast as the aurora. With an anxious expression he said, "Master, your subordinate will bring up the rear. You escape through the underground." Both of them were very clear that the so-called bringing up the rear was nothing more than sacrificing their own lives to delay a bit of time. Ji Tianqing raised his sleeve to wipe the blood from the corner of his mouth, with a cold expression. He shook his head and said in a low voice, "It's useless, the other party came prepared, we absolutely can't escape unscathed. The only thing we can do now is to fight to the end. Perhaps only then will we have a chance of survival." Just as his voice fell, the 10 black-clothed martial artists launched another attack, pouncing over from all directions. All kinds of light blades, sword chi, raging flames, and rays of light shot out like a rain of arrows, covering dozens of miles of the sky. In the blink of an eye, Ji Tianqing and Ji Bai were drowned in the sky full of attacks. The two of them were like a small boat in a stormy sea, about to capsize and be smashed into pieces by the huge waves. At the critical moment, Ji Tianqing hurriedly took out the Kenshin battle robe, which turned into a pair of golden wings. Golden rock wings unite. Swish! The golden wings instantly closed, protecting him. Ji Bai also took out a silver metal ball and poured a majestic amount of magic power into it. Immediately, the metal ball turned into a dark silver armor that wrapped around his body. The lines of the armor were extremely sharp, and there was a pair of wide wings on its back, making it look quite majestic. This was a mid-grade tribulation-grade heavenly soul battlesuit, a very exquisite magic treasure. When the 4th elder came to Xueqi City this time, he gave this armor to Ji Bai to help him better protect Ji Tianqing. In the next moment, an earth-shattering spell attack fiercely bombarded Ji Tianqing and Ji Bai. Bang, 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 bang. A series of muffled explosions resounded through the sky. The saber light, the sword light, and the spell light all exploded, turning into a colorful torrent that spread in all directions. A moment later, the 5-colored torrent dissipated, and the sky regained its clarity. However, the sky was empty. Ji Tianqing and Ji Bai were nowhere to be seen. The 10 black-clothed martial artists all held swords and sabers, their eyes sharp as they searched around. The red-robed man stood on the shoulder of the 2-headed giant ape, watching the battle in the sky without making a move.
He stared coldly at the ruins and ordered in a cold tone, "They are in the ruins, capture them for me."
The 10 black-clothed martial artists received the order and immediately landed on the ruins and drilled into the ground. They soon found Ji Tianqing and Ji Bai buried in the ruins, lying motionless on the ground, as if they had fainted. 4 black-clothed martial artists went to capture them, while the other 6 remained vigilant. Seeing that the 4 black-clothed martial artists came to Ji Tianqing and Ji Bai's side, they were about to cast a spell to capture them. Suddenly, the unconscious Ji Tianqing and Ji Bai's body lit up with a bright light, bursting out with a violent aura that could destroy the heavens and the earth. Heaven-cleaving sword. A dark golden sword light that was 100 feet long, wrapped in purple lightning, struck the 2 black-clothed martial artists. The distance between the 2 sides was too close, and the speed of the sword light was as fast as lightning, making the 2 black-clothed martial artists unable to dodge. Following 2 muffled pang-pang sounds, the 2 black-clothed martial artists were sent flying on the spot. A large amount of blood splashed out from their bodies. In the midst of the blood, there was a broken arm and a broken leg. Ji Tianqing pretended to be unconscious, and at the crucial moment, he burst out with all his strength and launched a surprise attack, seriously injuring the 2 black-clothed martial artists in one fell swoop. On the other side, Ji Bai also brandished his saber, using the Thunder Wild Saber, and in an instant, slashed 18 times. The fate of the 2 black-clothed martial artists was even more miserable. Their bodies were cut into pieces by the 18 lightning-like saber lights, turning into a pile of minced meat and blood rain. After all, his strength was comparable to the black-clothed martial artists, and the power of his saber technique was more powerful. The sudden change caused the black-clothed martial artists' eyes to change, and they immediately brandished their sabers and swords to surround and attack. The red-robed man in the sky also had a burst of cold light in his eyes, and killing intent burst out from his body. Despicable little bastard, sinister and despicable. He gritted his teeth and cursed, and hurriedly ordered the black-clothed martial artists, "Don't let your guard down, no matter what, take down Ji Tianqing." Those black-clothed martial artists previously thought that this mission was very simple. With their Tribulation Realm powerhouses, assassinating an Essence Soul Realm martial artist was as easy as flipping their hands. But now they had seen Ji Tianqing's methods, and no longer dared to be careless, and launched a fierce attack with all their strength. Both sides fought fiercely in the sky again. The 2 black-clothed martial artists, whose bodies were destroyed, were only left with their essence souls, and quickly escaped. The other 2 black-clothed martial artists, who were missing an arm and a leg, endured their injuries, and attacked Ji Tianqing and Ji Bai without caring about their own safety. Ding ding ding! Pang 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 pang! Both sides used their unique skills, and fiercely clashed in the sky, causing a series of explosions. 5 colored streams of light covered the sky, enveloping a radius of 100 miles. Everyone's figures constantly flickered, appearing and disappearing in the sky. In the beginning, Ji Bai protected Ji Tianqing with all his strength, helping him block countless attacks. After fighting for a while, Ji Bai began to be injured, and his injuries continued to worsen, and he was beaten to the point of retreating. He could not even protect himself, but he still risked his life to protect Ji Tianqing. After a short 100 breaths of time, he was covered in blood, and his black robe was full of cracks and wounds. The black-clothed martial artists knew that he was the most difficult to deal with, and as long as they dealt with him, killing Ji Tianqing would be as easy as flipping their hands. Therefore, 5 black-clothed martial artists joined forces to besiege Ji Bai, forcing him to constantly retreat, farther and farther away from Ji Tianqing. The other 3 black-clothed martial artists surrounded Ji Tianqing, and continued to besiege him. Ji Tianqing's situation also became precarious, and he could lose his life at any time. After exchanging hundreds of blows, his hair was disheveled, his white robe was stained with blood, and his body was covered in wounds. Fortunately, Kenshin's battle robe protected him, and helped him block several fatal attacks. Chapter 1632. Ji Tianqing was at the 7th level of the primordial spirit realm and had mastered many powerful techniques. He was not afraid of any genius or expert below the tribulation passing realm. He could defeat them all. However, the 3 black-clothed cultivators attacking him were all 3rd and 4th level tribulation passing realm martial monarchs. Their strength was much higher than his. They could completely crush him. There was a gap of a whole realm between them. There was no way he could escape,
let alone turn the tables. If he had not cultivated the galaxy body tempering art and had a strong physical body, he would have been killed several times over.
At this moment, he yearned for powerful strength.
If he could break through to the tribulation passing realm, even if he was only at the first level, he would not be in such a sorry state.
This battle was undoubtedly the most dangerous battle he had had in recent years. His chest, back, shoulders, and legs were covered with wounds so deep that his bones could be seen. Warm blood gushed out from the wounds, drenching his white robe and making him look particularly ferocious. His long hair was also messily draped over his shoulders, stained with blood. Piercing pain came from all over his body, tormenting his nerves. With his strong willpower, he stubbornly held on and clenched his teeth. He would not give up until the last moment. Boom! With a muffled explosion, a fist as large as a mountain hit him. Puffed!
He spat out a mouthful of blood and was sent flying, crashing into the ruins 10 miles away.
Another black-clothed cultivator rushed over, holding a long saber with both hands. He slashed out a 100-meter-long saber light. At this critical moment, Ji Tianqing could not dodge. He could only wave the burial of heaven to block the attack. Questioning heaven with horizontal sword. Boom! The saber light that could split heaven and earth shattered the 100-meter-long sword light and hit him. With a muffled sound, he fell from the sky and smashed into the ruins. A deep pit was formed in the ground, and dust flew everywhere. He was buried in the soil, and a heart-wrenching pain came from his body.
It was as if all the bones in his body were shattered.
30 miles away, Ji Bai was surrounded by 5 black-clothed cultivators.
His body was covered in blood and he was in an extremely sorry state.
He was beaten back again and again, almost unable to fight back. By chance, he caught a glimpse of Ji Tianqing in the distance.
Seeing that Ji Tianqing's injuries were severe and that he was about to die under the black-clothed martial artist's sword, he was so angry that his eyes nearly popped out of their sockets, turning blood red.
No! He let out an earth-shattering roar, and his entire body ignited with dark red blood flames. His body suddenly expanded. In the blink of an eye, he turned into a 30-meter-tall giant surrounded by lightning. His body was grayish-brown, as if it was formed from rocks, and his 4 limbs were shockingly thick. He held 2 purple lightning chains in his hands and ruthlessly whipped away the surrounding black-clothed martial artists. Then, he recklessly rushed towards Ji Tianqing. Several black-clothed martial artists were overwhelmed with shock and tried to intercept him. However, no one was able to resist Ji Bai directly. Without exception, all of them were sent flying by the lightning chains.
In the sky not far away, the red-robed man stood on the shoulder of the 2-headed giant ape, witnessing this scene with his own eyes.
Seeing that Ji Bai suddenly turned into a stone giant and was able to control lightning, his eyes flashed, revealing a deep shock. This is bloodline awakening?
I didn't think that this seemingly ordinary young man would actually have a different bloodline. The shock in the red-robed man's eyes quickly disappeared, and he coldly ordered, "Entangle him."
Once he ignites his bloodline, killing him will be as easy as flipping a hand. The 5 black-clothed martial artists received the order and immediately joined forces to form a battle formation, displaying an exquisite joint attack technique. They did not fight Ji Bai head-on, but only tried to intercept him so that he could not break through the obstacles and rescue Ji Tianqing. Ji Bai's entire body went berserk, roaring like a desolate beast, rampaging, wantonly releasing lightning that filled the sky. However, his attacks were all neutralized by the black-clothed martial artists, and he was unable to break out of the encirclement. Ji Tianqing was lying in a deep pit covered in blood, struggling with difficulty, trying to fly into the sky. At this moment, 3 black-clothed martial artists descended from the sky, waving their swords and sabers. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. The overwhelming saber light and sword shadows emitted an incomparably violent power, suppressing Ji Tianqing. Ji Tianqing was suppressed to the point that his face was deathly pale, and his body seemed to be frozen, unable to move.
Seeing that he was about to be chopped to death by the saber light and sword shadows. At the moment of life and death, he raised his head to look at the 3 black-clothed martial artists. His gaze was firm and unyielding, and he coldly shouted, "Burial of heaven, lend me a hand!" Finished speaking, he waved his hand and threw out the Burial of Heaven sword.
The Burial of Heaven sword immediately expanded, becoming 1,000 feet tall giant sword. At the same time, 1,000 feet tall golden sword appeared above Ji Tianqing's head. It was his primordial spirit. His entire body turned into a dazzling golden light, fusing with the primordial spirit golden sword. Then, the burial of heaven's sword also fused with the primordial spirit golden sword, causing the golden sword's power to increase by 2 times. Azure Dragon's Sacred Sword. From the 1,000-feet-tall golden sword came a roar that reverberated through the universe. In the next instant, the golden sword bloomed with dazzling golden flames, erupting with a destructive power that ruthlessly pierced toward the black-clothed martial artists in the sky. The dazzling golden flames condensed into the image of a divine dragon, enveloping the primordial spirit golden sword. This sword was filled with an indomitable aura. Like a sleeping dragon rising to the heavens, it seemed to pierce through the firmament, and nothing could stop it. Boom! Crack! Amidst a deafening explosion, the giant sword shattered the saber light and sword shadows that filled the sky, and ruthlessly pierced another black-clothed martial artist. In that instant, the black-clothed martial artist's body seemed exceptionally small in front of the 1,000-feet-long golden sword, like an ant. Crack! After being pierced by the Azure Dragon's sacred sword, his body actually shattered like a porcelain vase, disintegrating into fragments that filled the sky. Blood and pieces of flesh were instantly incinerated by the golden flames, turning into ashes. Only the black-clothed martial artist's primordial spirit luckily escaped the calamity, dodging the Azure Dragon's sacred sword's attack. Swoosh! The Azure Dragon's sacred sword flew tens of thousands of feet high in the sky, gradually exhausted, and stopped. Then, the burial of heaven's sword split up and rapidly returned to its original form. The primordial spirit golden sword and Ji Tianqing also separated and returned to their original state. Ji Tianqing was covered in blood, standing high in the sky with disheveled hair, holding the burial of heaven's sword in his hand. The primordial spirit golden sword dimmed and retracted back into his body. Just now, he had barely used the Azure Dragon's sacred sword. Using this sword technique at the critical moment of life and death had nearly exhausted all his magic power. The secret technique of the Azure Dragon's sacred sword, coupled with the amplification of the primordial spirit golden sword and the burial of heaven's sword, caused the might of this sword to be unprecedented. This was the strongest sword technique he could use at the moment. Fortunately, the effect of this sword was remarkable. It destroyed the physical body of a black-clothed martial artist, causing him to flee the battlefield in a sorry state. Unfortunately, Ji Tianqing could not use it a second time. The other 2 black-clothed martial artists were stunned for a moment before they chased after him even more ferociously. Die! Chapter 1633. Ji Tianqing's magic power was almost depleted and he could not hold on for long. The 2 black-clothed martial artists could easily finish him off. Moreover, the red-robed man and the 2-headed giant ape were eyeing him from not far away. Ji Tianqing knew that the red-robed man was the leader of this group of assassins and his strength was unfathomable. Even if he could create a miracle and kill the 2 black-clothed martial artists, he would still be killed by the red-robed man in the end. No matter how he looked at it, his ending was a dead end. Even so, he would not sit still and wait for death. Seeing the 2 black-clothed martial artists rushing over, he quickly took out a talisman from his interspatial ring. Creating something out of nothing, heaven and earth will help me. 5 elements true spirits. Ji Tianqing muttered as he formed a spell with both hands and shot out a few streaks of dazzling light into the talisman. Swoosh! The dark golden talisman ignited with flames and turned into a ray of sacred golden light that entered his body. Suddenly, his body expanded violently and quickly turned into a 30-meter-tall giant. His entire body was shining with dazzling golden light. The spiritual energy of heaven and earth within a 10,000-mile radius also surged crazily and turned into a spiritual energy tide that entered his body. His strength skyrocketed rapidly and his aura became powerful and domineering. His eyes were shining brightly. This talisman was a treasure from the Universal Treasure Box. It was the Myriad Transformations Spiritual Continuation Talisman that Hong Chengtian had personally refined. Its effect was very mysterious. It could stimulate a martial artist's potential and increase his magic power to the limit for 15 minutes. Just a moment ago, Ji Tianqing's magic power was empty and his spirit was dispirited. Now, he was full of energy and murderous intent.
When the 2 black-clothed martial artists rushed over, he did not hesitate to wave the burial of heaven's sword and slashed out 7 streaks of dazzling sword light.
7-star sword.
7 streaks of sword light that were hundreds of meters long collided with the attacks of the black-clothed martial artists, and a series of loud noises exploded.
The sword light shattered and the violent impact hit Ji Tianqing again and sent him flying. He fell into the boundless sea of clouds and flew backward for over 10 miles before he finally stopped. Cough, cough. The injuries to his internal organs were even more severe. His back was hunched, and his face was pale as he coughed up blood. The two black-clothed martial artists did not give up. They rushed over at the speed of light and once again brandished their swords. Swish! Swish! More than 30 sharp sword lights came from all directions, cutting off all of Ji Tianqing's escape routes. Ji Tianqing could only close his wings to protect himself. Bang, 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 bang. More than 30 rays of sword light slashed the golden wings one after another, resulting in a deafening explosion. Ji Tianqing was sent flying again. He fell straight down from the sky and crashed into a 3,000-meter-tall mountain with a loud bang. Half of the mountain was smashed, sending dust and gravel into the air. The power of the golden wings was finally exhausted. They became dim and retracted back into Ji Tianqing's body. Without the protection of the Kenshin battle robe, Ji Tianqing's situation became even more precarious. However, the two black-clothed cultivators were even more ferocious. They gave chase with surging killing chi. Swish! 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 Both of them brandished their swords and slashed out more than 40 sword lights, enveloping Ji Tianqing. Ji Tianqing had just climbed out of the ruins when he was enveloped by the sword lights. At this moment, he no longer had any trump cards that could resist the sword lights. He was about to be hit by the sword lights. Even if he did not die, his body would be destroyed. At this critical moment, an icy blue dazzling light suddenly lit up in the ruins beside him. Swish! The icy blue dazzling light rushed into the sky and bloomed above Ji Tianqing's head. It formed a light shield with a radius of 10,000 zhong, like an icy blue umbrella. Bang, bang, bang. More than 40 sword lights slashed the icy blue light shield, producing a deafening sound. The icy blue light shield shook violently, but it did not shatter. The sword light that filled the sky collapsed and shattered, turning into fragments that blotted out the sky and covered the earth, bursting out in all directions. Ji Tianqing was surprised and subconsciously turned his head to look at the ruins beside him. He saw a young woman in a white Taoist robe with two ponytails standing on top of the ruins like a lofty mountain. Although she was tall and thin, her face was a little thin, but her whole body exuded a mysterious and powerful cold aura. Her left hand formed a seal, manipulating the icy blue light shield in the sky, splitting it into thousands of icy blue sword lights, piercing towards the two black-clothed cultivators. In her right hand, she was holding a crystal-clear icy blue sword, exuding a bone-chilling cold. This was a woman in her early 20s. She was tall and thin, with a slightly ordinary appearance. People would not pay attention to her at first glance. However, her eyes were extremely large, far beyond ordinary people. Her pupils were also icy blue, making her look particularly mysterious. When Ji Tianqing looked at her, her eyes were focused on the sky, expressionless as she chased after the black-clothed cultivators. She did not look back and said to Ji Tianqing through telepathy, "Master, please leave this place quickly. Leave this place to me and Ji Bai." Her voice was crisp and clean, containing a decisive and capable temperament. Ji Tianqing thought for a moment and guessed her identity. A disciple of the Pillar of Heaven's mountain? Are you the Xueqi that the fourth elder mentioned? Xueqi is actually a woman. Previously in Xueqi City, the fourth elder had mentioned that Xueqi had also come. At that time, Ji Tianqing was still wondering if Xueqi was Ji Bai's brother or senior brother. But he never thought that Xueqi was actually a young woman. This name and the white-clothed woman in front of him didn't match at all, right? However, these thoughts flashed through Ji Tianqing's mind. He made a prompt decision and said, "I won't leave you guys behind. Let's advance and retreat together." As he spoke, he also rushed into the sky and charged towards the two black-clothed cultivators. The two black-clothed cultivators were stabbed by thousands of icy blue sword lights until they were dripping with blood, their bodies riddled with wounds. At this moment, Xueqi was still casting spells. She controlled thousands of icy blue light blades to form an icy blue hurricane that strangled the two black-clothed cultivators. Ji Tianqing took the opportunity to charge over. He opened the third eye on his forehead and released endless lightning. Boom! The destructive purple divine lightning condensed into a pillar of lightning and fiercely struck a black-clothed cultivator. the black-clothed cultivator was already heavily injured, and after being struck by the divine lightning pillar, his body collapsed on the spot, turning into countless pieces of pitch-black charcoal. With his body destroyed, his primordial spirit flew out. However, he didn't dare to stay in the sky and fled in panic. Seeing this scene, Xueqi turned her head and glanced at Ji Tianqing. A look of surprise flashed across her eyes. She had never thought that Ji Tianqing, who was only at the primordial soul realm, could control the power of divine lightning. No wonder Ji Bai is dead set on master and is extremely loyal. This thought flashed through her mind as she continued to control thousands of icy blue light blades to kill the other black-clothed cultivator. The black-clothed cultivator fell into the icy blue hurricane and didn't last long before his body was minced into pieces. Even his primordial spirit was injured by Xueqi and fled miserably. Ji Tianqing's crisis was temporarily resolved. Chapter 1634. Swoosh! Xueqi waved his hand and retracted the thousands of ice blue light blades in the sky. The light blades that filled the sky gathered in her hand and condensed into a palm-sized sword sheath. The sword sheath was ice blue in color. It was more than 3 feet long and more than a palm wide. The shape was very simple and elegant. The surface was engraved with mysterious patterns and words, and the edges were inlaid with dark golden jade. Clang! Xueqi held the ice blue sword and inserted it back into the sword sheath, emitting a crisp sound. Ji Tianqing stared at the sword sheath and sized it up a few times before he saw through it. The sword sheath was too wide, enough to place 2 swords side by side. Xueqi carried the sword sheath on his back as if he was carrying an exquisite stool. However, this was not an ordinary sword sheath. It was also a mysterious magic treasure. The sword sheath could split into tens of thousands of light blades and form a powerful sword formation. Xueqi's personality was cold and he did not say much. His figure flashed and rushed into the distance to rescue Ji Bai. Ji Tianqing hurriedly followed and took out 2 pills to take the opportunity to suppress his injuries. In the sky 50 miles away, Ji Bai was fighting with 5 black-clothed martial artists. His bloodline awakening had already ended. He had returned to his original appearance from the rock giant who controlled lightning. His black robe was tattered, his entire body was dripping with blood, and his hair was messy. His aura was very chaotic and his mana was very empty. He was already at the end of his rope and could faint at any time. The 5 black-clothed martial artists only suffered minor injuries. Their bodies were charred black by the lightning and they looked somewhat miserable. However, the 5 of them worked together to form a battle formation and firmly trapped Ji Bai. Ji Bai desperately rushed left and right, but he was still unable to break through the encirclement. Xueqi and Ji Tianqing flew across the sky at lightning speed and quickly approached Ji Bai. However, the 2 of them had only flown 30 miles when they were stopped by the 2-headed giant ape. Roar! The 2-headed giant ape roared and waved its 4 arms with a murderous aura. It opened its bloody mouth and released a raging fire that covered the sky and earth. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Instantly, a radius of 50 miles turned into a world of flames. Ji Tianqing and Xueqi were both engulfed by the monstrous flames. They tried their best to circulate their energy to resist the burning of the flames. Xueqi decisively pulled out his sword and controlled the sword case with his left hand. It condensed into a huge ice blue umbrella to block the flames that filled the sky. She waved the ice blue sword in her right hand and slashed out dozens of sharp sword lights toward the 2-headed giant ape. Pang, pang, pang. The 2-headed gigantic ape was enveloped by the sword light, and it immediately let out a series of blood-curdling screams. Blood splattered all over the sky. The flames that blotted out the sky were quickly dispersed by Xueqi. However, the red-robed man standing on the shoulders of the 2-headed giant ape had long been staring at Ji Tianqing. Taking advantage of this opportunity, he raised his hand and blasted out a dark golden fist aura towards Ji Tianqing. Ji Tianqing was caught off guard. He was hit by the dark golden fist light and was sent flying backward. There was a crater in his chest, and several of his bones were broken. Blood kept flowing out of his wounds. After suffering such a heavy injury, his strength weakened and his face was as white as a sheet of paper. The power of the myriad transformations continuation talisman also began to weaken. It wouldn't be long before it lost its effect. Ji Tianqing knew that he didn't have much time left. If he couldn't get out of this predicament before the effects of the talisman disappeared, he would most likely die here. At this time, Xueqi waved his ice-blue sword with all his might and crazily attacked the two-headed giant ape and the red-robed man. The giant ape and the red-robed man were pinned down and had no time to care about Ji Tianqing. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Ji Tianqing flew into the sky without hesitation and rushed towards Ji Bai. Xueqi could only temporarily restrain the giant ape and the red-robed man. It was useless for him to help Xueqi. It was impossible for him to defeat the other party. Rather than that, he might as well help Ji Bai out. Perhaps it would have a miraculous effect. Swoosh! Ji Tianqing endured his injuries and flew across the sky with the divine concealment step, arriving behind a black-clothed warrior. 5 black-clothed warriors formed a battle formation and attacked Ji Bai one after another. Ji Bai was beaten back and his injuries became more and more serious. Seeing this scene, Ji Tianqing's eyes flashed with a biting cold killing intent, and he brazenly used his ultimate skill. Heaven-splitting sword. He erupted with all his mana, holding the burial of Heaven's sword with both hands. He slashed at the black-clothed warrior with all his might. This sword strike converged the strength, essence, energy, and spirit of his entire lifetime. Moreover, it contained an all-conquering and violent will to destroy everything. That was the legendary sword intent. In the past, the burial of Heaven had reminded Ji Tianqing that if he wanted to become a true sword expert, he had to fuse his will with his sword arts and produce his own sword intent. At this moment, Ji Tianqing was in a desperate situation. He was filled with grief and anger, and his killing intent soared to the sky. He had finally comprehended sword intent. Bang! The 300-meter-long dark golden sword, carrying purple divine lightning, fiercely slashed at the black-clothed warrior, exploding with an earth-shattering sound. The black-clothed warrior was caught off guard and was instantly drowned by the golden sword light. His body of flesh and blood was actually split in half by the sword, and then killed by the divine lightning, turning into pitch-black charcoal. The blood that splattered all over the sky was also dispersed by the divine lightning Zidian. A blazing white primordial spirit flew out from the golden sword light and fled into the distance in panic. The black-clothed warrior's joint attack formation was thus broken by Ji Tianqing. The remaining 4 black-clothed warriors were obviously shocked, and they looked at Ji Tianqing with vigilance. There were even 2 black-clothed warriors who were close to him, waving their swords and sabers to kill him. Ji Tianqing's attack succeeded, and he quickly retreated, using the divine concealment step, hiding in the sky. The 4 black-clothed warriors couldn't find him for a while, so they could only continue to besiege Ji Bai. However, they were even more vigilant and alert. As they besieged Ji Bai, they monitored the surrounding movements. Ji Tianqing wanted to use the same trick again, but it was almost impossible. Therefore, he patiently hid in the dark, looking for an opportunity to attack. After the 4 black-clothed warriors and Ji Bai fought for more than 30 moves, Ji Bai's injuries became more and more serious, and his body was also on the verge of collapse. Finally, Ji Tianqing seized the opportunity and decisively used his trump card. God-slaying spear. He raised his left arm, and an endless golden divine flame gushed out from his palm, condensing into a 3-meter-long golden divine spear, and fiercely pierced towards a black-clothed warrior. That black-clothed warrior and his companion were sprinting side by side, waving their swords at Ji Bai with all their might. This was the best opportunity that Ji Tianqing patiently waited for. Whoosh! The indestructible god-slaying spear instantly pierced through the first black-clothed warrior's magic power shield and leather armor. Immediately after, the second black-clothed warrior was also not spared, and was pierced through by the god-slaying spear. Bang! In the deafening loud noise, the god-slaying spear exploded. The earth-shattering golden divine flame rose up like a mushroom cloud. The 2 black-clothed warriors were destroyed by the god-slaying spear, and turned into pieces of flesh, scattering in the sky. Their primordial spirits were also heavily injured, and they flew into the sky in a daze, fleeing into the distance. Chapter 1635. Ji Bai's crisis was resolved. The remaining 2 black-clothed martial artists were unable to trap him at all. Of course, Ji Bai was also an arrow at the end of its flight. His fighting strength had sharply decreased, so it was impossible for him to kill the 2 black-clothed martial artists. As for Ji Tianqing, his Fa Li was already exhausted and he had used up all his trump cards. His body was rapidly shrinking and gradually returning to its original state.
This was the effect of the 10,000 transformations continuation talisman was weakening and was about to lose its effect.
Ji Bai, if you don't leave now, when will you? Ji Tianqing shouted as he waved the Burial of Heaven's sword and slashed out a few sword lights, blocking the two black-clothed martial artists. Ji Bai took the opportunity to escape and followed him into the sky, escaping in the direction of Sealed God Mountain. Of course, while escaping, Ji Bai did not forget to use his divine sense to shout to Xueqi, "Junior sister, don't fight, find a chance to escape." Xueqi was fighting with the two-headed giant ape and the red-robed man, trying her best to resist the attacks of the giant ape and the red-robed man. Her strength was comparable to the giant ape, slightly weaker than the red-robed man, so it was particularly strenuous for her to fight. Most of the time, she was passively defending and resisting. She was beaten to the point of retreating and had no chance to fight back. Her situation was very dangerous, and her body was covered in dark red blood with many injuries. Seeing Ji Tianqing and Ji Bai successfully escape, her eyes flashed with a touch of relief, and she replied with a sound transmission, "Ji Bai, take master and retreat first, I will cover the rear." Ji Bai did not object and quickly followed Ji Tianqing. Now that he and Ji Tianqing were arrows at the end of their flight and had lost their fighting strength, Xueqi could cover the rear. When the red-robed man saw that Ji Tianqing had escaped, he immediately flew into a rage, killing intent surging in his eyes. "Damn little bastard! Don't even think about escaping from me!" The red-robed man shouted with a murderous aura. He rode the two-headed giant ape and chased after Ji Tianqing and Ji Bai. Roar! The two-headed giant ape also let out a furious roar, desperately flapping its flame wings, turning into a dark red stream of light, cutting through the sky. "Damn it! We can't let him catch up to master." Xueqi's expression changed, and he chased after him like a shadow. She controlled the sword case with her left hand and turned it into a sky full of sword lights to attack the two-headed giant ape. Her right hand waved the sword and attacked the red-robed man with all her might. In order to delay the two-headed giant ape and the red-robed man, she did not hesitate to consume a large amount of her magic power and used a powerful ultimate move. This move was indeed effective. The two-headed giant ape's speed was greatly reduced, and it was getting further and further away from Ji Tianqing. Ji Tianqing endured his injuries and summoned his Yuanshen golden sword. He flew across the sky with the speed of light. In a short span of 100 breaths of time, he had brought Ji Bai and fled a few hundred miles away, escaping the pursuit of the two-headed giant ape. His strength was completely exhausted, his consciousness blurred, and he almost fainted. Thus, he withdrew the golden primordial spirit sword and summoned the black dragon from the sword world. Roar! The black dragon let out a resounding dragon roar and carried Ji Tianqing and Ji Bai back to Bestowment God Mountain at its fastest speed. On the other side, Xueqi had been entangled with the two-headed giant ape and the red-robed man. Seeing Ji Tianqing and Ji Bai escape far away and their figures disappear at the end of the horizon, she finally breathed a sigh of relief. She no longer continued to fight. After two feints, she turned around and fled without hesitation. She turned into a blazing white light blade and flew across the sky as fast as lightning. Soon, she pulled away. The two-headed giant ape and the red-robed man chased after her with all their might. In the sky further away, two black-clothed martial artists also chased after the red-robed man. Unknowingly, an hour had passed. The black dragon carried Ji Tianqing and Ji Bai and finally flew back to the foot of Bestowment God Mountain. In the sky 100 miles behind them, Xueqi also turned into a white light and rushed over as fast as lightning. In the sea of clouds further away, the two-headed giant ape carried the red-robed man and chased after them with murderous intent. However, 100 miles away from Bestowment God Mountain, the two-headed giant ape stopped and stood on top of a mountain peak. The red-robed man stood on the shoulder of the giant ape and looked up at the sacred Bestowment God Mountain. His eyes flashed with a cold light, revealing a strong sense of unwillingness. "Damn it! In the end, I still let that little bastard escape." Although he had a mission, if he did not kill or capture Ji Tianqing, he would be severely punished by the great emperor of the Chu Yun Empire. However, he knew very well that Ji Tianqing had already escaped back to Bestowment God Mountain and he had no chance. If he rashly broke into Bestowment God Mountain, he would definitely alarm the Golden Armored Guard. At that time, he would definitely die miserably. No matter how unwilling and angry he was in his heart, he could only give up the chase. "Ji Tianqing, the next time you meet me, you won't be so lucky. I will definitely tear you into pieces. Definitely. The red-robed man cursed with resentment and rode the two-headed giant ape. He turned around and drilled into the sea of clouds, quickly disappearing into the distance. The black dragon stopped in mid-air, hiding in the vast white sea of clouds. Ji Tianxing was sitting on its back. His body was covered in blood, his aura was weak, and he was meditating. Ji Bai was lying on the dragon's back, his body covered in blood. His eyes were closed and he had fallen into a coma. Swoosh! A blazing white brilliance flew over and landed on the black dragon's back. The brilliance faded away, revealing a tall figure in a white dress. It was Xueqi. She glanced at the black dragon, and a strong sense of surprise flashed in her eyes. She almost couldn't help but scream. Of course, she recognized that this was a sacred black dragon, the legendary divine dragon. Before this, she had only seen the legends of the divine dragon in history books and biographies, but she had never seen it with her own eyes. If she saw the divine dragon with her own eyes on another occasion, she would definitely be shocked and exclaim in surprise. But not now. She quickly walked to Ji Tianxing's side and released her divine sense to check on Ji Tianxing's injuries. Seeing that Ji Tianxing was riddled with injuries, but they were all physical injuries and his primordial spirit was not seriously injured, she was finally relieved. She waved her palm and sent out a wisp of green wood light into Ji Tianxing's body to help Ji Tianxing heal his injuries. Ji Tianxing opened his eyes and shook his head at her. Xueqi, don't worry about my injuries. Let's take a look at Ji Bai's situation first. Xueqi nodded and quickly retracted her palm. She turned around and looked at the unconscious Ji Bai. She used her divine sense to check on Ji Bai's injuries. After checking the situation, she immediately frowned and her expression became serious. Ji Tianxing saw that her expression was strange and asked with concern, "How are Ji Bai's injuries?" Xueqi said in a low voice, "Master, Ji Bai's injuries are too serious and he has already fainted. He was already riddled with injuries, and the injuries to his body and primordial spirit were extremely serious. At the critical moment, he used his trump card, the lightning god's treasure body, completely overdrawing his strength and primordial spirit. However, Master doesn't have to worry too much. Ji Bai's life is not in danger. I have pills and treasures specially made for him to heal his injuries. He only needs to recuperate for a month and he will be able to recover." After hearing Xueqi's words, Ji Tianxing heaved a sigh of relief and nodded slightly. "Since that's the case, you and Ji Bai will stay near the Investiture God Mountain. You should treat his injuries as soon as possible." Chapter 1636. Xueqi brought the unconscious Ji Bai to the foot of Mount God Bestowment to treat his injuries. Ji Tianxing returned to the east courtyard of Heaven Saint Palace and entered a secret room to treat his injuries. The secret room was filled with spiritual energy, and many elixirs were stored. Moreover, the flow of time was 5 times faster than the outside world. Ji Tianxing recuperated in the secret room for half a month. The injuries of his physical body and primordial spirit were quickly healed. His strength had also returned to its peak state. At this time, only 3 days had passed in the outside world. On the morning of the 4th day, he ended his seclusion and walked out of the secret room. The guard guarding outside the secret room hurriedly came forward and respectfully handed over a letter. "Young Master Ji, a guard captain sent this letter yesterday afternoon. He said that he wanted to hand it over to you." Hearing this, Ji Tianxing raised his eyebrows and reached out to take the envelope, sizing it up. He saw that the letter was empty. There was no signature or signature. Ji Tianxing waved his hand to dismiss the guard. He opened the letter and took it out. The light purple letter paper emitted a fresh smell of sandalwood. The edges of the letter were covered with light silver patterns. A line of delicate and cute words was displayed on the letter paper. "Tianxing, long time no see. Please come to the north courtyard for a chat." There was only this line of words on the entire letter paper. Ji Tianxing frowned and a trace of doubt flashed across his eyes. Looking at this handwriting, it should be written by a woman. But who would call me that? North Courtyard? Which palace's North Courtyard is it? Could it be the Heaven Saint Palace? In his impression, there were many palaces at the peak of Mount God Bestowment. However, the Heaven Saint Palace was the largest. It was divided into 4 courtyards: east, west, south, and north. Ordinary God's disciples and God's envoys could not enter the Heaven Saint Palace. Only the sons of God, sons of God, and goddesses were qualified to live there. Thinking of this, Ji Tianxing's mind flashed and he immediately thought of a person. Jojo! That's right, every time she comes to the peak of Mount God Bestowment, she stays in the north courtyard. Moreover, when she left, she said that she would come back for the God-disciple assessment. Ji Tianxing put away the letter and walked out of the east courtyard, heading for the north courtyard. Half an hour later, he arrived at the gate of the northern courtyard.
The 4 golden-armored guards guarding the 2 sides of the gate bowed respectfully when they saw him.
Greetings, young Master Ji. Greetings, young Master Ji. His young highness has been waiting for a long time. One of the golden-armored guards had clearly been instructed by Jojo to lead the way for Ji Tianxing. Under the guidance of the guard, Ji Tianxing passed through the courtyard and a garden before entering the main hall of the northern courtyard. The spacious and bright main hall was the meeting hall of the northern courtyard. Next to it were the reception room and study room. Ji Tianxing sat in the main hall and waited while the golden-armored guard went to report the news. Not long after, the sound of footsteps came from the door. A man and a woman walked into the hall. Ji Tianxing quickly turned his head and looked at the entrance of the main hall. He saw who it was. The first person to enter the main hall was a little girl who was 1 meter tall and looked like she was carved out of jade. She was extremely cute and nimble. She was wearing a small red dress and had a pair of clear and flawless eyes. Her entire body was exuding an incomparably noble aura. Without a doubt, she was the little princess, Jojo. The person following behind Jojo was a tall and handsome young man. The young man wore a long golden robe with a golden dragon embroidered on his chest and sleeves. He also wore a luxurious golden crown on his head. He had long golden hair and a fair and handsome face. His blue eyes had a pair of golden pupils. This was a handsome and valiant noble young man. His every move showed that he was cultured and had a noble aura. Jojo had just entered the main hall. When she saw Ji Tianxing, a bright smile bloomed on her face and she waved happily to greet him. Tianxing, long time no see. Your name seems to have spread far and wide. As she spoke, Jojo blinked her big eyes and revealed a playful smile. Ji Tianxing smiled and nodded to greet her. He said, Princess Jojo, how have you been? You said that you would come back before the God-disciple assessment. I didn't expect that as a holy lady, you would go back on your words. Jojo stood in front of him and smiled awkwardly. She explained, I was delayed by something important. That's why I came back late. However, even if I came back late by more than a month, it wouldn't affect you. You still became the #1 God disciple. The two of them were like old friends who hadn't seen each other for many years. They chatted naturally and even joked with each other. The young man in the golden robe stood quietly behind Jojo and looked at Ji Tianxing calmly. He didn't say anything. After Ji Tianxing and Jojo exchanged greetings, he nodded to Ji Tianxing and said with a smile, Ji Tianxing, I've heard about you from Jojo. It's really better to meet you in person than to hear about you. Ji Tianxing looked at the young man in the golden robe and asked Jojo, Princess Jojo, this is? Jojo quickly pulled the young man's sleeve and introduced him with a smile. I was so focused on chatting with Tianxing that I almost forgot to introduce him to you. Tianxing, this is my 7th brother. He's one of the most outstanding people among my brothers. This time, when I returned to Mount God Bestowment, he specially came to help me complete the task. Ji Tianxing immediately understood the identity of the young man in the golden robe. He cupped his hands and said, It's the 7th Xueqi. Nice to meet you. The 7th Xueqi nodded with a smile and said, Don't be so polite. My surname is Tai Hao and my name is Yunqi. You can call me Brother Yunqi. Or you can call me Brother Yunqi like Jojo, or you can call me Brother Yunqi. Tai Hao Yunqi's manner of speech and demeanor were quite refined and elegant. It made people feel as if they were bathing in the spring breeze and would not feel bored at all. However, Ji Tianxing could feel that Tai Hao Yunqi only had a good temperament, but there was a sense of pride and arrogance in him. It was an innate sense of nobility and pride that came from the depths of his soul and was deeply ingrained. He would smile at people, and there was no sense of arrogance in his words. On the surface, he looked very kind. However, in the depths of his heart, he would never take ordinary people seriously. I'm the Xueqi of God, and I've known Jojo for a long time. I've even become the first disciple of God. That's why Tai Hao Yunqi looks at me differently and is pleasant to me. If other disciples of God were here, I'm afraid he wouldn't even be interested in them. This thought flashed through Ji Tianqing's mind, and he carefully looked at Tai Hao Yunqi. He realized that Tai Hao Yunqi's strength was unfathomable, far beyond Ji Bai and Xueqi. He was at least at the 5th level of the tribulation stage. Just as Ji Tianqing was pondering, Jiu and Tai Hao Yunqi had already taken their seats. Jiu looked at Ji Tianqing expectantly. Her eyes were shining as she quickly asked, "Tianqing, I came back late and missed the Disciple of God assessment." Chapter 1637. Both Ji Tianqing and Tai Hao Yunqi were stunned by Jiu's words. Ji Tianqing smiled and shook his head. "Your Highness Jiu, it's been almost 2 months. Let's not talk about it." Tai Hao Yunqi also revealed a smile and nodded in agreement. "Jiu, didn't the Great Guardian report the situation to you? Why do you ask Ji Tianqing to tell you again?
Moreover, those young geniuses are only in the primordial soul realm.
What can they do? It's fine if you don't listen." Tai Hao Yunqi patted Jiu's head affectionately as he spoke. His tone was casual as he spoke. It was obvious that he did not take Ji Tianqing and the God's disciples seriously. It was as though the battle between the young geniuses and the God's disciples was like a fight between ants. Ji Tianqing was even more certain of his judgment. Tai Hao Yunqi's temperament was just as he had guessed. Jiu pouted as a look of disappointment flashed across her eyes. "All right. I'll ask Tianqing to tell me more in the future." Tai Hao Yunqi nodded and smiled. "Our mission is almost complete. Now there's only one thing left. What do you say? Or should I say it?" Jiu volunteered. "Let me tell Tianqing." Ji Tianqing raised his eyebrows and looked at Jiu calmly. Jiu looked at him sincerely and said slowly, "Tianqing, I've returned to the God's kingdom for the past 6 months and reported everything about you to Father. Although Father has been cultivating in seclusion, he left a clone in the God's kingdom." When Jiu said this, Tai Hao Yunqi clearly frowned and secretly sent a voice transmission to remind her. Jiu's body trembled. She quickly skipped that part and continued, "Father God has already noticed you and is very optimistic about your future. Therefore, Father God sent down a divine decree to let the clear heaven pagoda focus on nurturing you, hoping that you can stay on Mount God bestowment and cultivate in peace." Ji Tianqing frowned slightly when he heard this. "Jiu, I told you about this. I won't be staying on God Rank Mountain forever, and I'll be leaving soon. As for the reason, you should be well aware of it." The brilliance in Jiu's eyes dimmed. She nodded and said, "Tianqing, of course I can understand your feelings. I also hope that you can find your wife soon and reunite with her. However, the Father and I both hope that you can stay. I even discussed with Father God that after you find your wife, you can also bring her to Mount God bestowment. Father God will show mercy and let your wife become a God's disciple, so that you two can live together." Ji Tianqing frowned and thought for a while. Then, he shook his head and said, "Jiu, thank you and Mr. God Lord for your kindness. But I'm afraid it's hard to realize." He knew that Yun Yao's identity was special. She was the reincarnation of Goddess Yaoguang, and also someone personally appointed by Luo Shui martial god. More than 20 years ago, Luo Shui martial god had secretly ordered the palace lord to set up this plan. Now, Yun Yao had finally entered Luo Shui divine kingdom and was cultivating there. How could Luo Shui martial god let her go? Jiu's little face showed a trace of disappointment, and she was a little depressed. Tai Hao Yunqi also frowned and said in a low voice, "Ji Tianqing, you should know how difficult and glorious it is to become a God's disciple under Father God. Every 20 years, hundreds of top geniuses from the 6 empires gather at the peak of God Rank Mountain. In the end, 90 people will be eliminated, and only the 10 strongest will become a God's disciple. Father God is willing to show mercy and grant your wife the status of a God's disciple. This is his care for you. You must cherish it." Ji Tianqing glanced at Tai Hao Yunqi and said indifferently, "Although Tai Hao Divine Lore has good intentions, my wife doesn't need the status of a God's disciple." Tai Hao Yunqi frowned and looked disappointed. He sighed and said, "Ji Tianqing, I've long heard that you are arrogant and unyielding, and your words and actions are unreasonably arrogant. I didn't expect it to be true. In addition, you are deeply in love with your wife. In the eyes of ordinary people, this is admirable and admirable. But in the eyes of us experts, it is extremely foolish. Taihao Yunqi showed a look of exasperation as he lectured Ji Tianqing in a serious tone. With your talent and the noble status of the son of God, you will definitely become a martial expert in the future, and even a saint emperor. When that time comes, you can have any woman you want. Even if it is a beauty that can cause the downfall of a country, you can choose. As a genius martial artist, you should understand that only powerful martial strength is worth pursuing. As long as you have enough strength, power and beauty will be at your fingertips. When Jiao heard this, she vaguely felt that something was wrong and could not help but frown. Seventh brother. Don't say any more. Let's listen to Tianqing's thoughts. Only then did Taihao Yunqi shut his mouth and looked at Ji Tianqing indifferently. Ji Tianqing glanced at him and said calmly, Brother Yunqi and I have different views. It's fine if you don't say anything. Taihao Yunqi immediately frowned, his face full of disappointment. Jiao hurriedly waved her small hand and tried to smooth things over. Seventh brother, Tianqing. Let's not talk about this anymore. Let's talk about it later. After that, she looked at Ji Tianqing and said solemnly, Tianqing, before I came to Mount God Bestowment, Father God gave me a mission. Father God wants to see you personally and has some questions to ask you. So, I hope you can come with us to the kingdom of God. Ji Tianqing raised his eyebrows and asked, How long will it take to go from here to the kingdom of God? Jiao answered truthfully, If it's fast, it'll take half a month. If it's slow, it'll take a month. Ji Tianqing decisively shook his head and refused. In a few days, I'll be leaving Mount God Bestowment to participate in the 3 kingdoms of God. I definitely won't be able to go to the kingdom of God. There won't be enough time. Jiao smiled and hurriedly waved her hand. No, Tianqing, don't worry about this problem. The 3 kingdoms of God exchange has always been held in the ruins of God. There's a space-time passage in the kingdoms of God that leads directly to the ruins of God. Come with us to the kingdom of God. After meeting Father God, you can pass through the space-time passage and reach the ruins of God. There's definitely enough time. Ji Tianqing remained silent and frowned as he weighed the pros and cons. Jiao saw that he was wavering and added, Tianqing, I already know about the grudge between you and the Chu Yun Empire. Forgive me for being blunt, but with your current strength, I'm afraid it'll be difficult to resist the Chu Yun Empire's revenge. If you want to solve the problem completely, the best way is to meet Father God. No matter how powerful the Chu Yun Empire is, they are still Father God's people and must obey Father God's orders. You should understand what I mean, right? Jiao's words hit the nail on the head. Ji Tianqing immediately nodded and agreed. Chapter 1638. Seeing Ji Tianqing agree, Jiao heaved a sigh of relief. This was one of the missions that Divine Lord Taihao had given her. She wanted to complete the mission and also let Ji Tianqing meet Divine Lord Taihao. After all, only the divine sons, divine daughters, and the divine emperors of the 6 states had the right to meet the Divine Lord. It was a great honor for Ji Tianqing to be summoned by the Divine Lord. She naturally hoped that Ji Tianqing would receive this honor. Taihao Yunqi was not moved. His expression was calm, and he even felt that this was how it should be. In his opinion, if it were any other ordinary young genius, being summoned by the Divine Lord would be an honor that would be hard to come by in 3 lifetimes. No one could refuse such a lofty honor. But Taihao Yunqi did not know that Ji Tianqing had only agreed to go to the Divine Nation because he wanted to resolve the matter of the Outcloud Empire. He did not care about honor or luck. In any case, he did not plan to stay on God's Sealing Mountain for long. In the future, he would eventually meet up with Yun Yao. Ji Tianqing waited in Heaven Saint Palace for an entire day. After Jiao and Taihao Yunqi finished dealing with other matters, they set off with Ji Tianqing the next morning. The 3 of them left God's Sealing Mountain together. Taihao Yunqi took out a silver flying ship and carried Ji Tianqing and Jiao toward the north. This flying ship was a superior-grade tribulation magic treasure. It flew extremely quickly, like a bolt of lightning streaking across the sky. Taihao Yunqi steered the flying ship while Ji Tianqing and Jiao stayed in the ship and chatted idly. After a day, the 2 of them had finished talking about everything they could talk about. Thus, Ji Tianqing silently meditated and cultivated while Jiao returned to her room to sleep. About 5 days later, the flying ship arrived at the depths of a vast ice plain and began to fly high into the sky. Ji Tianqing could vaguely sense that the flying ship continued to ascend, passing through layers of clouds and reaching a height of 30,000 feet above the ground. This was the Heavenly Dipper energy layer, and the sky was filled with violent winds and astral fire. Ordinary primordial spirit experts would not dare to stay in the Heavenly Dipper chi layer. If he stayed here for too long, his body would surely be minced into pieces by the heavenly winds, his soul core would be incinerated by the flames, and he would be obliterated in the end. Only tribulation transcendence experts could travel through the Heavenly Dipper chi layer. Outside the atmosphere of the Big Dipper, there was a dark and boundless void. The void was cold and gloomy. It was a complete vacuum. There was not a trace of air, nor was there any heaven and earth spiritual chi. In the pitch-black void, there was a mysterious 5-colored vortex.
The silver flying boat entered the vortex and flew quickly and silently as if it had entered a splendid tunnel.
A few hours later, the flying boat finally flew out of the space-time tunnel and entered a colorful world. After finishing his cultivation, Ji Tianqing walked out of the room and stood on the bow of the airboat. He looked ahead and surveyed his surroundings.
He saw that the sky was as blue as if it had just been washed, and below him was a myriad of colorful mountains and rivers.
As far as the eye could see, there were green mountains and clear waters everywhere. White clouds and thick fog lingered around the mountaintops. Birds chirped and apes howled in the mountains. There were several large rivers at the foot of the mountains that looked like pearls and jade ribbons that sparkled under the sunlight. There were also groups of spirit cranes that flew above the water and let out crisp cries. The extremely dense heaven and earth spiritual chi condensed into strands of 5-colored spirit fog in the air that drifted along with the breeze. Not only was the heaven and earth spiritual chi several times denser than that of the Xunwu continent, but there was also an invisible power that filled the world. The aura of this power was sacred and boundless, and it could invisibly strengthen a martial artist's body and cleanse their spirit. Ji Tianqing could clearly feel that his mind had become calm and peaceful in this world, and many distracting thoughts had been cleansed and purified. Invisibly, he even had the illusion that he had become one with the world, and all sorts of insights appeared in his mind. The sword intent that he had comprehended during the previous battle had also become more profound. These various changes shocked Ji Tianqing and made him feel incredulous. Is this the legendary divine kingdom of Taihao? Sure enough, there's an invisible divine power enveloping this place. It's worthy of being called a holy land of the martial Tao. It's no wonder that the young geniuses of the 6 nations dream of entering Mount God Seal and becoming an honorary disciple. Becoming a God disciple would have the opportunity to study in a divine kingdom or take up a position there. Cultivating in such an environment would increase one's innate talent, and the speed at which one's strength would increase would be extremely fast. Even if one couldn't become a God disciple, one could still enjoy the generous environment of a divine kingdom as a servant. It's a pity that the geniuses of the 6 nations were so unlucky this time. Something happened at the divine glacier mine, and those who were eliminated have all gone to mine. Just as Ji Tianqing was silently sighing, an area that flickered with golden light appeared at the end of the horizon in front of him. As the flying vessel flew past the mountains and rapidly approached the area, Ji Tianqing could gradually see it clearly. It was a huge city with an imposing aura. It was a city in the clouds that flickered with golden light. The huge ancient city was at least 150 kilometers wide, and it floated in the sea of clouds above the mountains. The city walls were 300 meters tall, and they were extremely majestic. There were many tall buildings in the city, and there were rows of magnificent palaces and towers that reached into the clouds. The setting sun in the afternoon shone on the huge city, and the countless glazed roofs reflected a dazzling golden light. Thick clouds and fog surrounded the huge city, and it didn't dissipate no matter how strong the wind blew. It even covered the huge city with a mysterious veil. Ji Tianqing looked at the ancient city from afar, and he only felt that it was both real and illusory. It was like a heavenly palace or a blessed land of immortals. Soon, the flying vessel arrived outside the towering city and landed at the south gate. 2 rows of guards in golden armor stood at the foot of the city gate that was 300 meters tall. Each of them had a dignified aura and were extraordinarily mighty. Swoosh! With a flash of light, Taihao Yunqi put away the silver flying vessel. He, Ji Tianqing, and Jiu appeared and stood side by side at the city gate. The guards in golden armor guarding the city gate were about to interrogate the 3 of them about their identities and intentions. Seeing Taihao Yunqi and Jiu, the guards in golden armor were stunned. Then, a look of reverence appeared on their faces, and they respectfully knelt down to pay their respects. Greetings, 7th son of God. Greetings, Your Highness Jojo.
The 2 rows of guards in golden armor knelt on both sides of the city gate respectfully.
Taihao Yunqi ignored the guards and led Jojo and Ji Tianqing into the city through the city gate.
The guards in golden armor didn't stand up until the 3 of them were far away, and they started to whisper to each other. The 7th prince and his highness have returned from the lower world.
Why did they bring back a young man?
I heard that the 7th prince and his highness went to Mount God's ceiling.
That young man should be a disciple of Mount God's ceiling, right?
It shouldn't be. The 7th prince and his highness personally escorted him to the holy nation?
No disciple of God would receive such treatment.
That white-robed young man must be extraordinary.
There must be something special about him. Chapter 1639. Ji Tianqing, Jojo, and Taihao Yunqi walked side by side on the wide jade road. This straight and wide road led from the southern city gate to the plaza in the center of the city. After passing through the plaza in the center of the city, they continued to walk toward the northern district, where they saw an exceptionally sacred and magnificent palace complex. This was Taihao Palace. There were very few pedestrians on the jade road, and the ground was very clean and tidy. Many statues and stone tablets were erected on both sides of the road. Streets and alleys crisscrossed through the city. Rows of tall buildings and pagodas, as well as many exquisite palaces, were arranged in neat rows, making for a very grand sight. As the 3 walked, Jiao explained the situation of Taihao Kingdom to Ji Tianqing. This is Taihao City. 60% of the entire kingdom's martial artists are gathered here, and there are close to 6 million people. There are many spirit veins and precious lands outside the city, and there are many villages and tribes scattered around. Many rare races live here. Although it's called a kingdom, it's actually a small world. It's a secret realm that has existed since ancient times, and it's connected to Shenwu continent.
Ji Tianqing nodded and asked doubtfully. Along the way, I saw that most of the commoners in the city are at least at the primordial spirit realm, and there are almost no ordinary people. Are the 5 million martial artists in the city all geniuses and powerhouses selected from the 6 great empires? Jojo shook her head and explained. Not all of them, except for a few who came from the lower realms. Most of them are originally citizens of the kingdom. Ji Tianqing was surprised and asked in disbelief. The natives here actually have such powerful martial talent, and all of them can reach the primordial spirit realm? Jojo revealed a proud expression and nodded. Although not all of them can reach the primordial spirit realm, they are close. After all, this is Father's kingdom. It has the most abundant cultivation resources in the world, and it's also protected by Father's divine power. Not to mention humans, even a bird or a demon beast can become an essence soul realm demon supremacy after a few hundred years of nourishment from divine power. Ji Tianqing nodded and said with some emotion, it's truly blessed by the heavens. As expected of a kingdom, it's a miracle. By the way, why are there so many rare races living in the villages and tribes outside of Taihao City? Jiao thought for a moment and explained. It said that in ancient times, there were tens of thousands of races on the continent. However, after a huge calamity and upheaval, many races perished. By the time Father took control of Taihao's kingdom, the various races were on the verge of extinction. Father was merciful, and he could not bear to see the ancient times, so he brought some races that were on the verge of extinction to the kingdom. After tens of thousands of years of reproduction, the races that were about to disappear are now thriving again. Ji Tianqing nodded again and smiled. Divine Lord Taihao, this is a good move. God by God. By God by Zhou. By Zhou by God. The was. The 2 of them chatted as they walked. Before they knew it, they had passed through the northern city district and arrived at the gates of the vast divine palace. Only at close range did Ji Tianqing truly realize how majestic and divine Taihao Divine Palace was. 2 lifelike golden dragons were carved on the 1,000-foot-tall palace gates. The 4 golden words Taihao Divine Palace were carved on the lintel, exuding the domineering aura of a sovereign who looked down on the world. Below the palace gates, the divine palace guards wore golden armor. They all had sabers at their waists and golden halberds in their hands. The insignia of Taihao Divine Kingdom was embroidered on their chests. When Ji Tianqing's group of 3 stepped through the palace gates, the guards on both sides knelt down and bowed, their postures extremely respectful and pious. After entering the divine palace,
Taihao Yunqi parted ways with Ji Tianqing and Jiu. He left alone to report to God Lord Taihao and take care of some matters. Jiu led Ji Tianqing through the majestic palaces and into a palace called Rui. This resplendent palace was Jiu's personal residence. It was her personal residence.
Inside and outside the palace, there were more than 100 golden armored guards and more than 100 maids and divine servants.
Jiu settled Ji Tianqing in a guest room on the first floor, not far from the guest hall. Ji Tianqing meditated in the room and waited patiently for an entire afternoon. Only when night fell did Jiu come to find him. Tianqing, I just reported to Godfather. I will now take you to see him. Okay, thank you for your trouble. Ji Tianqing nodded and followed her out of the room. A few moments later, Jiu led him deep into the palace and into a bright and spacious study. The study was rather large and luxuriously decorated. It was a dazzling sight of gold everywhere. Under the northern wall, there was a large purple jade desk and a large purple jade throne inlaid with gems. On the desk were several ancient texts, a bronze incense burner, and a mysterious black stone half the height of a person. The black stone was oval-shaped and made of an unknown material. It flickered with white light and its use was unknown. Ji Tianqing looked around and saw that there was only him and Jiu in the study. He asked, Jiu, aren't you taking me to see the Divine Master? Why are you in the study? Jiu chuckled. Tianqing, don't worry. Godfather is always in seclusion. Even I can't see his real body. Usually, when I report to Godfather, I communicate with him through the divine stone.
With that, she formed a spell with both hands and shot out a dazzling white light into the mysterious black stone on the desk.
Swoosh!
The mysterious black stone lit up with a dazzling white light and condensed into a tall and mighty figure. This was a middle-aged man wearing a golden robe. He was tall and sturdy and had a dignified face. His clothes were simple and plain, but his thick eyebrows revealed a domineering aura. His deep eyes contained wisdom that could see through everything. Ji Tianqing recognized him at a glance. This white-robed man was martial god Taihao. Of course, this was only the projection of martial god Taihao's clone. Jiu looked at martial god Taihao with a smile. She bowed and reported, Godfather, Jiu has brought Tianqing here. Martial god Taihao looked at her kindly and waved his hand. Jiu, you can leave now. Don't let anyone come close. Godfather has something to talk to him alone. Jiu was startled. She pointed at the tip of her nose and pouted. Godfather, even I can't listen?
Of course. Martial god Taihao nodded slightly. His tone was kind but contained an unquestionable authority. Jiu pouted and nodded. All right, Jiu will leave now. With that, she quickly left the study and cast a spell to activate the defensive formation of the study. Chapter 1640. The secret room was so quiet that even the drop of a needle could be heard. Ji Tianqing and martial god Taihao's clone looked at each other in silence. After a long while, Ji Tianqing finally spoke and broke the silence in the secret chamber. Greetings, Divine Master. He greeted martial god Taihao with a cupped fist salute. Martial god Taihao finally came back to his senses. His expression was complicated as he said slowly, You're too similar. Not only do you look the same, even your bloodline and aura are the same. Ji Tianqing had been mistaken for martial god Taihao a few times before, so he wasn't surprised by martial god Taihao's reaction. He smiled and asked, Divine Master, are you talking about Kenshin? Of course. Martial god Taihao nodded and looked at him with sparkling eyes.
He asked, If your cultivation wasn't so weak, I would have thought that he had returned.
Ji Tianqing raised his eyebrows and smiled meaningfully. He asked, If he really did return, how would you react? Martial god Taihao was clearly taken aback. He looked at Ji Tianqing playfully and said, Although I don't believe that someone who has been dead for 1,000 years can come back to life, I don't believe that someone who has been dead for 1,000 years can be reborn. However, if he really does come back to life, I'll be happy for him. Ji Tianqing nodded and thought to himself, in Kenshin's memory, Kenshin and martial god Taihao were good friends. After all, Kenshin had taught martial god Taihao before. They had no grudges or conflicts of interest. Martial god Taihao should be trustworthy. Martial god Taihao sighed and said with a wry smile, Unfortunately, you're Ji Tianqing. You can only be Kenshin's successor. You're not him. Besides, I can guess what you're thinking. You don't need to test my attitude. If I was hostile to you, you would have disappeared a long time ago. How could you still be alive? Ji Tianqing nodded and said calmly, I've made a fool of myself in front of the Divine Lord. But I still want to ask, why did the Divine Lord summon me? Martial God Taihao said in a deep voice. Firstly, I would like to meet an old friend from 1,000 years ago. You might not be him, but you look very much like him. Secondly, I owe him a favor and have never had the chance to return it. If I return this favor to his successor, perhaps he will feel gratified in the underworld. Martial God Taihao looked at Ji Tianqing sternly and said solemnly, Ji Tianqing, I know everything that has happened in the past 6 months since you entered Mount God's Seal. Your talent is extraordinary, and your future is promising. As expected of the successor of Kenshin. Although you are now the #1 God's disciple, a God's disciple is only equivalent to my disciple in name. You can't be compared to the Son of God. Now, I want to take you in as my last disciple. If you agree, you will be my only disciple, and your status will be equivalent to the eldest son of God. Ji Tianqing frowned when he heard Martial God Taihao's words, and a look of shock flashed across his eyes. He knew very well that although Martial God Taihao had 99 children, he had never taken in a single disciple in his entire life. If he agreed, he would become Martial God Taihao's only disciple, and his status would instantly rise by more than 10 times. Martial God Taihao's last disciple would definitely be one of the most respected figures in the Taihao kingdom. Even in the entire Xinwu continent, he would be one of the most respected figures in the world. If Ji Tianqing agreed, then he would have a meteoric rise, reaching the heavens in a single bound. From then on, he would be able to reside in the Taihao kingdom and enjoy the best treatment and cultivation resources. With Martial God Taihao as his backer, almost no one would be able to threaten him. However, Ji Tianqing still shook his head and refused after weighing the pros and cons for a moment. Lord Deity, Kenshin gave you pointers in the past, but unfortunately, he left this continent before you could return the favor. This matter caused you to feel regret in your heart. Now, you want to return this favor to me. I can understand your feelings, and I am very grateful for your decision. However, I am very sorry that I cannot agree to it. Ji Tianqing's tone was very calm, but it was also very stubborn and resolute. Martial God Taihao frowned and revealed a look of disbelief. He asked, Ji Tianqing, have you really thought it through? You actually rejected me so straightforwardly? I know that your current situation is very bad. Not only are you enemies with the Outcloud Empire, but you are also being targeted by the powerhouses of the Ghost Clan. If you agree to this matter and become my last disciple, all of your problems will be easily solved. Ji Tianqing shook his head and smiled. A treasured sword's edge is sharpened, and the fragrance of plum blossoms comes from the bitter cold. Back then, Kenshin roamed the Xinwu continent and slaughtered his way from the west to the east. In a short 30 years, he became a saint. What he relied on was not the protection of powerhouses, but the sword in his hand and his tenacious heart. As Kenshin's successor, I naturally want to imitate him. No matter what difficulties or dangers I face, I will solve them myself. Martial God Taihao listened quietly and stared at him in silence for a long time. After about 10 breaths of time, Martial God Taihao revealed a gentle smile and nodded. You really are too much like him. How great would it be if you were him? Since you have such aspirations, I will not force you. Of course, I will still deal with the matter of the Outcloud Empire. The 6 great empires have existed for thousands of years in peace and stability. I will not allow anyone to break this balance and cause chaos in the divine kingdoms. Ji Tianqing nodded in agreement and asked, Since the Lord Deity already understands the cause of this matter, how will you deal with it? Martial God Taihao said in a dignified tone, The current chaotic situation was caused by Emperor Outcloud's greed. If he had not been so greedy, why would he have fallen into your trap and given up on the Outcloud Empire? I have already ordered the eldest son to lead the Divine Might Legion to the Outcloud Empire to capture Emperor Outcloud. He will be suppressed in the Divine Kingdom's endless black prison and suffer for 100 years. Ji Tianqing said calmly, Emperor Outcloud made a grave mistake and committed such a sin. The Lord Deity is only imprisoning him in the prison for 100 years. You are truly merciful. Martial God Taihao glanced at him and smiled. Ji Tianqing, You probably don't know about the endless black prison. Ask Jojo when you have the chance. In addition, the great Emperor Chu Yun was once my disciple and a rare martial sage expert. I can't kill him because of this, can I? Letting him reflect in the endless black prison for 100 years is already a severe punishment. Ji Tianqing saw that martial god Taihao had made up his mind and did not say anything else. He naturally hoped that martial god Taihao would give the order to kill Emperor Outcloud to prevent future troubles. However, this was not realistic. There were only a dozen martial saints in the entire divine kingdom. Killing one meant one less. Chapter 1641. Martial god Taihao had already concluded what would happen to great Emperor Chu Yun, so Ji Tianqing could not say anything. He thought to himself that he might become a martial saint in 100 years. By then, even if great Emperor Chu Yun wanted to take revenge on him, he would not be afraid. He thought for a while and thought of another question. He asked, Divine Master, great Emperor Chu Yun will be locked in the boundless dark prison to reflect on his actions for 100 years. What about the Chu Yun Empire? Without a martial saint, there will be more chaos. Martial god Taihao smiled and said confidently, I have already made arrangements for this. You don't have to worry. The first divine son's strength and experience have been honed. He can take on a heavy responsibility. In the next 100 years, the first divine son will temporarily take over the position of divine emperor and control the entire Chu Yun Empire. Ji Tianqing was relieved. He stopped asking about the Chu Yun Empire and changed the topic. Divine Master, you mentioned the ghost race just now. I believe you know about the Glacier Divine Mine, right? Martial god Taihao nodded slightly and said calmly, For nearly 10,000 years, the ghost race has been holed up in the North Underworld Mountain. They have never shown themselves and outsiders have not been able to enter. The ghost race has not been active on the continent for so long that the other races have almost forgotten about their existence. I did not expect them to leave the North Underworld Mountain and go to the Glacier Divine Mine to cause trouble and kill so many miners. Fortunately, you disguised yourself as a divine servant and took care of the two ghost race that caused the disaster. You also chased away the demon king hiding in the glacier. Otherwise, the trouble in the Glacier Divine Mine would have lasted for a few more months until the second divine son personally went to investigate. Ji Tianqing's body shook. His eyes were filled with shock. Divine Master, you even know that I disguised myself as a divine servant and secretly killed the two blood gods? He thought that he had done it secretly. He did not expect martial god Taihao to expose him. Only now did he believe that martial god Taihao was like the eye of a god. He looked down on his territory and could see through everything. Martial god Taihao smiled and said in a dignified tone, In my territory, as long as I want to know, I will know. The Cold Ice Martial Lord, who was in charge of the Glacier Divine Mine, deliberately concealed the news. He could not deal with the disaster in time and did not report it in time. This god has already given the order to punish him severely. That devil monarch of the ghost race hiding in the Arctic abyss had long fled upon hearing the news. Now, the Glacier Divine Mine has returned to normal. Ji Tianqing frowned and thought for a moment, then asked, Divine Lord, since the Ghost Clan has been hiding in the North Underworld Mountain for nearly 10,000 years and has never moved around the continent, why are you still here? Why did they leave the North Underworld Mountain and run to the Glacier Divine Mine to cause trouble? Martial god Taihao looked at him playfully and said meaningfully, Not only did a few Ghost Clan experts run to the Glacier Divine Mine to cause trouble, my spies have also found out that a large group of Ghost Clan experts have left the North Underworld Mountain and are moving around in my territory. As for why they left North Underworld Mountain and started to move around the continent, you should know better than I do. Their target is you. Ji Tianqing frowned and fell silent for a moment before saying, Divine Lord, to tell you the truth, when I first came to the Shenwu continent from the Tianxian continent, I was chasing after the ancestral demon god. You should have heard of the legend of the ancestral demon god, right? Martial god Taihao frowned, and a look of disbelief flashed across his eyes. He asked in astonishment, The ancestral demon god? You chased it all the way to the Shenwu continent? How is that possible? Of course, this god knows about the legend of the ancestral demon god. The ancestral demon god was the primogenitor of the ancient demon race, and it was also one of the reasons for the ancient war. During the ancient war, countless deities and powerhouses from various races were massacred by it. It led 3,000 blood gods and wantonly massacred the people and powerhouses of various races, causing the ancient races to wither and perish. Today, 99% of the ancient races have perished, and only a few hundred races are left. But didn't the ancestral demon god fall during the ancient war? After the ancestral demon god fell, the remaining demons on the Xueqi continent were encircled and annihilated by the various races. Those that escaped the net retreated to Dark North Mountain and changed their names to the Ghost Race. They never dared to appear in the world again. Ji Tianqing nodded and said, originally, the ancestral fiend god had fallen in the ancient war. But no one expected that a trace of its spirit remained, and it slept in the blood river of the demon race's sacred land for 30,000 years. After that, the demon king tried everything to revive the ancestral demon god. Although I killed the demon king, I couldn't do anything to the ancestral demon god, and it escaped here. After listening to Ji Tianqing's explanation, martial god Tai Hao came to a realization and nodded. So that's how it is. A trace of the ancestral demon god's spirit was not destroyed, and it slept for 30,000 years before being reborn. This is simply inconceivable. When he thought of this, martial god Tai Hao looked deeply at Ji Tianqing, and a thought flashed through his mind like lightning. The ancestral demon god managed to preserve a trace of its spirit and was reborn after 30,000 years. Kenshin was revered as the king of gods back then. Did he really fall? Will he be like the ancestral demon god and be reborn after 1,000 years? Just as martial god Tai Hao was deep in thought, Ji Tianqing spoke. God Lord, the ancestral demon god has most likely fled back to Dark North Mountain. It must be conserving its strength and quickly recovering its vitality. Once it recovers, it will definitely lead all the demons to sweep through the Xueqi continent and cause another bloody catastrophe. I suggest that you act as soon as possible and kill it before it recovers. Otherwise, it will be too late to act when it matures in the future. Martial god Tai Hao nodded and said solemnly, Ji Tianqing, I will seriously consider your suggestion. I will also send the Xueqi Legion to clean up the ghosts that have intruded into my territory. However, Dark North Mountain has been a forbidden area since ancient times, and it is extremely dangerous. Even my Xueqi Legion will find it difficult to enter that forbidden area, and it will be even more impossible to wipe out all the ghosts. Also, I am currently in seclusion to comprehend a divine art. I will not be able to come out for a while, and I will not be able to act personally. Ji Tianqing immediately understood what martial god Tai Hao meant and could not help but frown. Martial god Tai Hao is currently in seclusion. A martial god like him can stay in seclusion for decades or even centuries. He cannot personally deal with the ancestral demon god, and the Xueqi Legion cannot attack Dark North Mountain. The only thing he can do is kill all the demons that enter the territories of the 6 nations, but this will not affect the foundation of the demons. When he thought of this, Ji Tianqing let out a long sigh. I can only hope that the ancestral demon god will not recover its peak strength within 100 years, and it will not attack Dark North Mountain. Chapter 1642. Ji Tianqing hated the demon clan to the core and wished he could kill the ancestor demon god as soon as possible to prevent future troubles. However, martial god Tai Hao had never dealt with the demon clan before and had no enmity with them. Naturally, he would not be as anxious as him. Moreover, martial god Tai Hao was in seclusion and would not come out in a short period of time. Ji Tianqing could only drop the matter and did not mention it again. Martial god Tai Hao continued, Ji Tianqing, the previous Kingdom Exchange Conference will be held in the Ruins of God. Every exchange conference was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for God's disciples from different countries. After you go to the Ruins of God, you must perform well. Perhaps you will have an incredible harvest. Ji Tianqing nodded to show that he understood and asked, what is the great opportunity that the God Master is talking about? Martial god Tai Hao was silent for a moment before he opened his mouth to explain, this will have to start from the origin of the Ruins of God. The Ruins of God originated from the ancient era and appeared after the ancient war. Legend has it that it was the world of the gods, but it was destroyed in the ancient war and became a ruin. There are also some legends that say that it is the resting place of the ancient gods and there are countless tombs of the gods buried there. There is a mysterious messenger who guards the Ruins of God for his entire life. Everyone calls him the Old Man of God. Every time the Kingdom Exchange Conference is held, the Old Man of God will secretly observe it. If there is an outstanding talent or a peerless genius,
The old man of God will appear and choose this genius to enter the ruins of God. In the past few thousand years, there have been more than 10 peerless geniuses who were lucky enough to be chosen by the old man of God and entered the ruins of God. After these geniuses entered the ruins of God, they all had shocking gains. They either obtained ancient divine items or the inheritance of an ancient god. In the end, these geniuses became the most dazzling experts in the continent and basically all reached the martial sage realm. After listening to martial god Taihao's explanation, Ji Tianqing came to a realization and nodded. I see. The ruins of God is equivalent to the graveyard of the ancient gods, and there are countless divine Tao inheritances buried there. In the past few thousand years, only a dozen geniuses were chosen by the old man of God and were lucky enough to enter the ruins of God. In that case, the old man of God's appearance is extremely rare. He might not appear in this kingdom exchange conference? Martial god Taihao nodded slightly and said, Exactly. Whether or not the old man of the godly ruins will appear depends on whether or not there are any peerless geniuses among the god's disciples of the three divine kingdoms. Ji Tianqing nodded and said with a calm expression, If that's the case, then we can only let nature take its course. This matter cannot be forced. Martial god Taihao was just reminding him. He did not have high hopes. Then he changed the topic and said, Ji Tianqing, I heard from Jiu that you are looking for your lost wife? Exactly. Martial god Taihao said gently, It's like looking for a needle in a haystack if you want to find her on your own. Why don't I issue an order for the spies of the various empires to help you find them? You'll definitely be able to reunite with your wife soon. Ji Tianqing bowed and said, Thank you for your kindness, Divine Lord, but there's no need for that. I've already found her tracks. I'll be able to see her and reunite with her during the Kingdom Exchange Conference. Martial god Taihao raised his eyebrows. His eyes flickered with astonishment. Is your wife a god disciple of the other two kingdoms? Ji Tianqing did not hide it. He admitted it openly. That's right. My wife is now under martial god Luo Xue. Martial god Taihao would find out about it sooner or later with his ability. He might as well be honest with him, which made him seem more upright. Martial god Taihao frowned slightly and asked in a deep voice, So you won't be returning to Mount God's ceiling after the Kingdom Exchange Conference? Ji Tianqing looked at him calmly and said solemnly, To be honest, I'll try to reunite with my wife. I might not be able to stay on Mount God's ceiling. However, I'll remember the Divine Lord's kindness and care. If the Divine Lord needs me in the future, I'll do my best to repay the Divine Lord's kindness. Martial god Taihao was silent for a while before he smiled and said in a playful tone, I'm only taking care of you because of Kenshin. Why would I need you to repay me? Besides, it'll be at least a few thousand years before I need you. With martial god Taihao's strength and status, he was one of the three giants of the Shenwu continent. Why would he care about Ji Tianqing's repayment and help? Ji Tianqing also understood this point, so he didn't say anything else. Martial god Taihao continued, Everyone has their own aspirations, so I won't force you. If you want to go to Luo Xue Kingdom, go ahead. After all, you're a descendant of Kenshin. If Luo Xue knows about this, he'll definitely take good care of you. Of course, whenever you want to return to Taihao Kingdom, Mount God's ceiling will always open its doors to you. Martial god Taihao's tone and expression were calm and indifferent. He seemed very tolerant and open-minded. Ji Tianqing bowed and cupped his hands. Many thanks for the Divine Lord's help. Martial god Taihao nodded slightly. You must remember not to forget your original intentions. Don't ruin Kenshin's reputation. Alright, you may go. After he finished speaking, martial god Taihao's clone projection gradually dissipated and soon disappeared. The dazzling white light disappeared, and the mysterious black stone became dim. The study quieted down, and the light returned to normal. Ji Tianqing quietly pondered for a moment before turning to leave. When he walked out of the study, he saw Jiu standing outside. She had a gloomy expression on her face as she pouted and counted the time with her fingers. When she saw Ji Tianqing come out, she immediately revealed a joyful expression and hurried over to welcome him. Tianqing, you're finally out. Are you done talking to father? What did you talk about? Jiu raised her head and looked at Ji Tianqing. Her small face was filled with anticipation, and her big round eyes were filled with excitement. Ji Tianqing smiled and said,
The Divine Lord told me about the Kingdom Exchange Conference.
He mentioned the ruins of God and the messengers of ruins of God.
He asked me to perform well. Jojo nodded and said in a clear voice. Even if Father didn't tell you about this, I was going to tell you. The ruins of God is the world's #1 forbidden area. Every martial artist in the world dreams of entering the secret realm.
You must perform well and obtain the favor of the old man of the ruins of God. Other than this, what else did Father tell you?
Ji Tianqing saw that her desire for knowledge was too great. He couldn't bear to disappoint her, so he said, "The Divine Lord also told me about the Chu Yun Empire. He wants to send the eldest divine son to take over the Chu Yun Empire. He also wants to capture the Chu Yun Great Emperor and imprison him in the endless black prison to make him repent. By the way, Jojo, can you tell me about the endless black prison?" Endless black prison? Jojo's eyes widened. The smile on her small face disappeared, and her eyes were filled with fear. Chapter 1643. Jojo only revealed one sentence about the endless dark prison and did not mention anything else. Where was the endless dark prison? How terrifying was it? What dangers were there? He had no answer to any of these questions. However, Ji Tianqing knew that the great Emperor Chu Yun would not have a good life in the next 100 years. He and Jojo left the study and walked back to their residence. Along the way, Jojo pestered him with many questions to find out about his conversation with martial god Taihao. In Jojo's opinion, martial god Taihao did not allow her to eavesdrop and was being so mysterious. They must have talked about some secrets. Her strong curiosity made her want to get to the bottom of this matter. Ji Tianqing had a headache and could only brush her off with a few perfunctory words. He then returned to his residence to rest. After a night of recuperating and meditating, his mental state had recovered to its peak, and he only felt refreshed. The God's kingdom is indeed blessed by nature and envied by others. Meditating here for a night is equivalent to cultivating in Mount God bestowment for 3 days. Ji Tianqing made a comparison in his heart and the result was shocking. The next morning, he found Jojo and said that he wanted to leave. He had achieved his goal of coming to the God's kingdom and there was no need for him to stay. Jojo frowned in confusion and asked, "Tianqing, you just came to the God's kingdom. Why are you in a hurry to leave? The God's disciples of Mount God bestowment have just left and it will take them at least 20 days to reach the God's ruins. If you leave now, you can reach the God's ruins in an instant and reach 20 days earlier than them. Don't you still have to wait for them? If that's the case, why don't you stay in the God's kingdom and leave when the time is near?" Ji Tianqing frowned and thought about it. He did not say anything. Jojo pulled his arm and continued to persuade him, "Tianqing, the God's ruins is very strange and dangerous. If you go alone, you might not even find the place. It's not easy for you to come to the God's kingdom. You should go and see the scenery. Even if you don't go sightseeing, you can stay in your room and cultivate. It's faster than cultivating in the lower bound." In the end, under Jojo's insistence, Ji Tianqing decided to stay in the God Kingdom for half a month. Seeing that he had finally agreed to stay, Jojo was especially happy. She hurriedly pulled him out of the hall. "Tianqing, let me take you to see the scenery of the Divine Kingdom." Regardless of whether Ji Tianqing agreed or not, Jojo pulled him out of Rui Palace. Under Jojo's orders, the captain of the guards brought over a snow-white winged Pegasus for the two of them. The heavenly horse was a divine steed. It was tall and holy, and there was not a single strand of variegated hair on its body. It emitted a faint silver light. Jojo brought Ji Tianqing onto the Pegasus. The Pegasus spread its pure white wings and flew into the sky. Shwa! The heavenly horse was flying in the sky above Taihao City, gracefully circling and dancing in a leisurely manner. Jojo pointed at the buildings in the city and took the initiative to introduce them to Ji Tianqing. "Tianqing, look over there. That's the market, the largest trading market in the city. Many martial artists trade there. Some rare treasures often appear there, as well as many interesting things. Seventh brother and I often go there to take a look. Over there is the tower, the tallest building in the city. It was built by the royal craftsmen of the Divine Palace. It only took 3 days to complete. And over there, the largest palace is the 100 Clans Assembly. Usually, if there are any major events of the 100 Clans outside the city, they will report to the 100 Clans Assembly. Xueqi continued to introduce, feeling a little excited. Ever since she first met Ji Tianqing in the Xianpin Gate, she felt that Ji Tianqing was different from the rest. He was very special. This inexplicable feeling gradually deepened as she interacted more with Ji Tianqing. Because of this, she tried her best to persuade Ji Tianqing to stay. In the depths of her heart, she always wanted to spend a few more days with Ji Tianqing. Perhaps she could understand him better. Ji Tianqing listened quietly. Occasionally, he would ask a question or two, and from time to time, he would be amused by Xueqi. Unknowingly, the Pegasus carried the two of them out of Taihao City and flew out of the city. Outside Taihao City, there were rolling mountain ranges. They were basically deep mountains, great lakes, and thousands of feet high peaks. In some of the flatter mountain peaks and valleys, there were a few villages and tribes scattered around. Although these villages and towns were not big, they had a very long history. The houses and buildings had a special style and style. The small villages only had a few dozen families, and the population was only 100 or 200. The bigger towns had thousands of houses and buildings, and the population was as high as 10,000. Ji Tianqing stood on the back of the Pegasus and looked down at the many villages and tribes. Indeed, he saw many strange races. There was the mermaid clan who lived by the lake. They had a human body and a fishtail. There were the ancient tree shepherds who lived in the lush forest. They had the body and limbs of a big tree, but they had the head of a human. There was also a centaur tribe who lived on a hillside facing the sun. There were more than 200 people in the tribe. They all had the body of a horse, 4 hooves, and a tail, but their necks were no different from humans. There were also the rare Miluo lion men, silver star wolf men, ancient willow tribe, flower spirit tribe, and so on. Ji Tianqing had never heard of most of the races. After seeing them, he felt that it was an eye-opener. There were only a few races that he had seen in the ancient books. However, this was the first time he saw them with his own eyes. About 2 hours later, the Pegasus flew deeper into the mountain range. Xueqi pointed at a 2,000 feet high peak in front of them and said to Ji Tianqing, "Tianqing, that's the Moon Fox Mountain, the territory of the Moon Fox tribe. The people of the Moon Fox tribe, regardless of their gender, are very handsome and kind. They are good at making a kind of cake called the moon mark. It's very delicious. I used to visit them often." Ji Tianqing smiled and said jokingly, "You want to eat their cake, right?" "Yes." Xueqi nodded and said with a smile, "I'll take you to try it. I believe you'll like it too." While they were talking, the Pegasus carried the two of them to the sky above the Moon Fox Mountain. This 2,000 feet high peak stood in the middle of the mountains. It was very beautiful and had its own good fortune. The middle of the mountain was covered by clouds and mist. The peak of the mountain was surrounded by a sea of white clouds. It was like a fairyland. The mountain peak with a radius of more than 30 miles was relatively flat. There were dense forests and grasslands growing on it. A huge 5-colored light shield covered the peak of the mountain like a sky curtain, protecting the territory of the Moon Fox tribe. When the Pegasus flew close to the 5-colored light shield, 6 Moon Fox tribe guards in silver armor came forward to welcome them. Ji Tianqing took a closer look. The 6 Moon Fox tribe guards were all young men. They were tall, handsome, and had long silver hair. Each of them had a handsome face, a pair of pointy white ears, and a pair of silver eyes. Their auras were also somewhat feminine. Chapter 1644. The 6 guards of the Moon Fox tribe recognized Xueqi. They did not need to look at Xueqi's identity token. They quickly opened the 5-colored light shield and bowed in unison. "Greetings, Your Highness. Welcome to the Moon Fox tribe, Your Highness." All the guards greeted Xueqi respectfully with smiles on their faces. Xueqi waved at them and rode the Pegasus to the grassland at the peak of the mountain. Dozens of old houses and mansions were scattered on the flat green grass. They were all made of marble and inlaid with a large number of moonstones. At the northern end of the grassland, there was a 3-story silver palace at the edge of the forest. The palace was not big, but it had a unique design. It exuded a sacred and solemn aura. At the top of the palace, there was a statue of a mythical beast. Ji Tianqing glanced at it and vaguely saw that the white jade statue seemed to be an exceptionally handsome fox. While he was looking around, many people of the Moon Fox tribe had already gathered around him. Most of them were wearing long silver robes. Regardless of gender, age or gender, they were all tall and slender. They were either handsome or beautiful. When the people of the Moon Fox tribe saw the Pegasus on the grassland, they all looked at Xueqi. Everyone looked excited and expectant. They all knelt on the ground and kowtowed to Xueqi. "Greetings, Your Highness. Greetings, Your Highness." Xueqi was already used to this. She smiled and waved her hand. "Everyone, please leave. I'm just here to take a look." The people of the Moon Fox tribe stood up, but they did not want to leave. They stood far away and looked at Xueqi and Ji Tianqing with smiles. Xueqi smiled at Ji Tianqing and explained, "The people of the Moon Fox tribe are too friendly. Every time I come, I have to disturb the entire tribe. It makes me feel a little embarrassed." Ji Tianqing nodded and smiled. That's why the ancients summed it up well. Those who take advantage of others are soft-hearted. Ah! Xueqi was stunned. She smiled awkwardly. "It seems like what you said is true. No wonder I feel embarrassed." "That's easy. You just have to bring them some small gifts every time you come," Ji Tianqing said with a smile. "Good idea." Xueqi nodded in agreement. The two of them chatted as they walked towards the house 1,000 feet away. It was a 2-story house with walls made of silverstar stones with fine veins. There were already some mottled traces of the vicissitudes of life. 2 silver foxes were engraved on the 2 light golden doors, giving off a somewhat demonic aura. The walls of the 2-story building in the courtyard were inlaid with rows of moonstones, forming a mysterious and special pattern that flickered with silver light. Xueqi pointed at the small building and introduced it to Ji Tianqing. "That's Moon Dream's home. She makes the best pastries in the entire Moon Fox tribe." Ji Tianqing smiled and asked, "Looks like you've been here a lot." Xueqi smiled and explained, "More than 10 years ago, I met Moon Dream when I was traveling around the God Nation. She provoked a group of demon beasts deep in the mountains when she was picking herbs. She was surrounded and injured, and her life was in danger. I saved her and sent her here. She let me stay here for a few days to thank me. She even made many pastries for me." Xueqi's face was full of smiles as she talked about the past. There was a hint of pride in her words. Ji Tianqing lowered his head and looked at her with a smile on his face. He also felt a little warm in his heart. He could tell that Xueqi and Taihao Yunqi had different natures. Although she was the most honorable goddess and the most favored princess, she did not have Taihao Yunqi's arrogance and aloofness. She was still very simple and kind. Occasionally, she would be a little muddle-headed. She was very cute. All in all, she would be very popular no matter where she went. In this martial Dao world where people's hearts are sinister and dark everywhere, I'm afraid only someone with Xueqi's status can remain untainted by the world and maintain a pure and kind heart. This thought flashed through Ji Tianqing's mind, and he felt a little emotional. At this moment, a series of footsteps came from behind them. Ji Tianqing and Xueqi stopped and turned around. They saw a woman from the Moon Fox clan in a long silver dress. She was escorted by 4 guards in silver armor, and she was walking quickly toward them. The Moon Fox woman looked to be in her early 30s. It was hard to tell her actual age. She had a seductive figure and a beautiful face. She was dressed in a luxurious robe and wore a silver crown on her head. She also held a 2-foot-long scepter in her hand. Ji Tianqing could tell that this Moon Fox woman's strength and temperament were extraordinary. She should be the leader of the Moon Fox tribe. The Moon Fox woman came closer and looked at Xueqi respectfully. She bowed and said, "Greetings, Your Highness. It is the Moon Fox tribe's honor to have Your Highness here again." Xueqi raised her hand and said with a smile, "You don't have to be so polite, Silver Moon Priestess. I'm just here for a walk. You don't have to accompany me." In the Moon Fox tribe, the Grand Priestess was the leader with the highest authority. Silver Moon bowed again and said yes to Xueqi. She then looked at Ji Tianqing and asked, "Your Highness, may I ask who this distinguished guest is?" "My friend. I brought him to see the scenery," Xueqi said with a smile. Silver Moon's eyes flashed with shock as she sized up Ji Tianqing. In her opinion, someone who could be called a friend by Xueqi must have an extraordinary status. He must be someone as important as a god's son or a goddess. Although Ji Tianqing was only at the primordial soul realm, he looked calm and had an extraordinary aura. Silver Moon couldn't see through him at the moment, so she bowed slightly and greeted him, expressing her welcome. Ji Tianqing only nodded slightly in return and didn't say anything. After a while, the Silver Moon Priestess left with her guards. Jiu led Ji Tianqing to the front door of the house. She pushed the door open and stepped into the yard. A beautiful woman with a graceful figure in a silver silk dress was weaving in the courtyard. When she saw Jiu and Ji Tianqing enter, she quickly stood up and bowed in surprise.
Your Highness, why are you here?
Jiu nodded with a smile and said, I'm here to see you. I also brought my friend to try your cooking. Then, she introduced Ji Tianqing. Tianqing, this is Moon Dream. Moon Dream bowed to Ji Tianqing and exchanged a few pleasantries. Then she pulled Jiu and said eagerly, Your Highness, since you're here, I'll make some pastries for you later. Also, I'm planning to make a dress for you after I'm done. Is that so? Let me see. Jiu was pleasantly surprised. She followed Moon Dream into the living room to see the unfinished dress. Ji Tianqing stood alone in the yard and looked around. Chapter 1645. Old Ji, let me out. Chen Yu's voice suddenly rang out. It sounded anxious and excited. Ji Tianqing immediately stopped in his tracks and furrowed his eyebrows slightly. He secretly used his divine thought to ask Chen Yu, what happened? Chen Yu hesitated for a moment before it said in a strange tone, Old Ji, did you come to a strange place? Ji Tianqing looked around and explained, I'm in the Moon Fox tribe of the vast divine kingdom. I heard from Jiu that this is an ancient tribe that originated from ancient times.
Judging from the style of the people and the architecture of this tribe, it is indeed a little special.
Chen Yu was silent for a moment before it changed into an excited tone. It said expectantly, Old Ji, you're in the divine kingdom and in an ancient tribe? Let me out quickly. The scenery in the divine kingdom must be beautiful. I want to see it too. I think I heard you say something about delicious food. I want to try it too. Chen Yu's change in tone made Ji Tianqing feel that something was wrong. Don't you need to cultivate in seclusion? Why did you come out at this time? Chen Yu said sarcastically, cultivating all day long will make my brain stupid, okay? I also need to rest and relax. Old Ji, you won't be so cruel to me, right? Ji Tianqing knew its character and knew that there was something wrong with it. He said in a serious tone, There must be something wrong. Tell me honestly, what do you want? Chen Yu hesitated for a while before it told him the truth. Old Ji, I don't know what's going on either. I vaguely feel that this place has something to do with me. Let me out and I'll see for myself. Then I'll know what's going on. Ji Tianqing turned his head to look at the only palace in the tribe. He stared at the fox statue at the top of the palace and observed it for a while. Ever since he came to the Moon Fox tribe, he noticed that there were fox pictures and statues everywhere in the tribe. The fox was not an ordinary demon beast. It was very majestic and had a bit of a celestial aura. After hearing Chen Yu's words, he also felt that something was wrong. After considering for a moment, he nodded in agreement. I can let you out, but you must behave yourself and don't cause trouble for me. Of course, you still don't believe me. Chen Yu, of course, promised. Ji Tianqing was relieved and opened the exit of the sword world. Shwa! With a flash of icy blue light, Chen Yu flew out of the sword of burial of heaven. At this moment, it did not reveal its 300-meter-long true body. Its body had shrunk 1,000 times, and it was only the size of an ordinary fox. Its entire body was emitting an icy blue brilliance, and its 12 furry tails almost covered half of its body. After landing on the ground, it looked around with a cunning look in its eyes. Ji Tianqing was just about to remind it not to run around when Jiu and Moon Dream walked out of the room. They were talking and laughing as they walked into the courtyard. Tianqing, let's sit in the living room and talk. What's this? Jiu was talking to Ji Tianqing when she suddenly noticed Chen Yu, and her eyes lit up. Moon Dream also saw Chen Yu, and her body shook. She stared at Chen Yu with her eyes wide open. However, before they could see Chen Yu's face clearly, Chen Yu flew out of the house and disappeared in the blink of an eye. Ji Tianqing frowned. He was about to send a voice transmission to Chen Yu to call it back. Jiu came up and asked curiously, Tianqing, is that little beast your pet? Ji Tianqing nodded. She looks quite cute. Why haven't I seen her before? Jojo stuck her head out and looked around. There was some anticipation in her eyes. Moondream's expression was complicated as well. She peeked out secretly, and her heart was filled with doubts. However, she was not familiar with Ji Tianqing, so she was too embarrassed to ask. Then, the three of them entered the living room and sat down. Moondream personally brewed tea for Ji Tianqing and Jojo. She also brought some spirit fruits before going to the kitchen to make some pastries. The tea was the Moon Fox Clan's Star Spirit Tea. It tasted refreshing, and one would have rolling spirit qi after drinking it. The spirit fruits were also a species unique to Mount Yao Yu. They were very attractive and contained wisps of star power. After Ji Tianqing ate the two spirit fruits, the star power merged into his body and subtly tempered his body. After all, he had cultivated the galaxy body tempering art and could absorb the star power to temper his body. The spirit fruits on Mount Yao Yu were very beneficial to him. Unfortunately, he was worried that Qianyu would cause trouble, so he was distracted and could not focus on refining the star power. About an hour later, Moondream finally finished her work. She brought a plate of fragrant pastries to Ji Tianqing and Jojo. There were 8 crescent-shaped pastries on the simple silver tray. Each pastry was light silver and emitted bits of starlight. They were like the moon that had shrunk millions of times. The pastries were very exquisite. Even the texture was very particular. They also contained rich star power, which was very beneficial to cultivators. Jojo had been thinking about it for a long time. She eagerly picked up a pastry and tasted it. Ji Tianqing did not stand on ceremony and started tasting the moon mark. Moondream looked at the two of them expectantly, waiting for their comments.
When the two of them were satisfied and full of praise, a smile bloomed on her face, revealing an expression of pride and honor. However, just as Ji Tianqing and Jojo were tasting the delicacies and Moondream was blissful, there was a sudden exclamation.
"Oh my God! Everyone, look!
What's going on?
The divine fox has appeared!" A sudden clamor sounded in the air above the grassland. Ji Tianqing, Jojo, and Moondream were stunned. They hurriedly walked out of the living room and into the yard. The three of them looked toward the center of the tribe and saw the only palace in the tribe emitting starlight. Many Moon Fox clansmen in silver and white dresses were flying toward the palace quickly. More and more clamorous noises came from all around the palace. The originally peaceful Moon Fox tribe suddenly became lively and noisy.
What's going on?
Jojo frowned and looked at Moondream in confusion. Moondream was also confused. It seems like something happened in the temple. Could it be that Qianyu got into trouble again? Ji Tianqing had a bad premonition and frowned. He only thought for a moment before flying into the sky and flying toward the temple. "Let's go and take a look." Jojo and Moondream quickly followed him and flew toward the temple.
In the blink of an eye, the three of them flew thousands of feet away and arrived at the entrance of the temple. There were already more than 200 people gathered outside the entrance of the ancient temple. Almost all the Moon Fox clansmen were alarmed. The holy and solemn silver temple was enveloped in a dazzling silver light. Chapter 1646. More than 200 Moon Fox tribesmen gathered outside the temple, discussing fervently. Everyone craned their necks to look into the temple, their faces full of doubt and shock. That's strange. Why would the temple suddenly light up and release such a strong divine power? Could it be that the fox god has shown his spirit? Could it be that our tribe's sincerity has moved the fox god? Look, the source of the divine light is the fox god statue. Don't worry, the high priestess and the guards have already entered the temple to check on the situation. There will be a result soon. I wonder if it's a blessing or a curse for something like this to happen in the temple. Ji Tianqing, Jojo, and Moondream were even more confused when they heard the crowd's discussion. Even if they asked around, no one would be able to explain the cause and process of the incident. They did not know what was going on. Just as everyone was discussing, 2 guards escorted the Silver Moon Priestess out of the temple. The Silver Moon Priestess' expression was very serious. Her face was as cold as ice, and there was a hint of anger between her brows. However, she suppressed her anger and maintained a dignified demeanor. She stepped over the marble steps and went straight to Jojo. "Your Highness, something happened in the shrine. I'm sorry to have disturbed you." "I'm deeply sorry." As she spoke,
The Silver Moon Priestess bowed to Jiao. Jiao frowned and asked with concern, "Silver Moon Priestess, this temple is the Moon Fox tribe's place of faith. It has always been peaceful. How could something happen? What the hell happened? Can I go in and take a look?" The Silver Moon Priestess did not answer directly. She glanced coldly at Ji Tianqing and said calmly, "Little Highness, this is very strange. I'm afraid it has something to do with your friend." Jiao was even more confused. She turned to look at Ji Tianqing and asked, "Silver Moon Priestess, what is going on?" The Silver Moon Priestess took a deep breath and explained in a low voice, 100 breaths ago, an ice-blue demon beast barged into the temple. After the guards found it, they wanted to chase it out of the temple so as not to disturb the ancestors of our clan. Who would have thought that the little beast's speed was so fast that it actually dodged the guards' chase and entered the statue. It even swallowed the summoning moon divine stone in one gulp. I've already asked the guards to investigate. Someone saw the demonic beast flying over from Moon Dream's house. What? Jiao, Moon Dream, and the others opened their eyes wide in disbelief. Ji Tianqing frowned and a touch of helplessness flashed in his eyes. He thought to himself, "Damn Qian Yu, just now he promised me that he wouldn't get into trouble. I didn't expect that in just a short while, it would cause such a huge disaster for me." He didn't know what the divine moonstone the Silver Moon Priest was talking about. However, the Silver Moon Priest and the rest of the Moon Fox clansmen were shocked and furious. Seeing everyone's reaction, Ji Tianqing could also guess that the divine stone of the summoning moon was definitely something extremely important. After all, this temple was the place of worship for the Moon Fox clansmen. It was a sacred place that could not be desecrated. The statue and the divine stone of the Moon Fox clan were also the sacred objects of the Moon Fox clan. The Silver Moon Priest looked at Jiao and said in a low voice, "Young Highness, to be honest, if this young master was not your friend, I would have already ordered him to be arrested. Our clan has always believed in the ancestors. Even when we were on the verge of extinction, we did not forget to protect the statue and the divine moonstone of the ancestors. To us, nothing is more important than the statue and the divine moonstone. Now that something like this has happened, I implore young Highness to deal with it impartially." The Silver Moon Priest's tone was very solemn. After she finished speaking, more than 200 Moon Fox clansmen knelt on the ground and kowtowed to Jiao. "Your Highness, please uphold justice for us." Everyone's tone was filled with grief and anger. It was obvious that if Jiao wasn't present, these angry Moon Fox clansmen would have already attacked Ji Tianqing. Jiao also felt troubled and said, "Silver Moon Priest, don't be anxious. Let's go in and take a look first. I believe that my friend will not have any ill intentions towards the Moon Fox clan." After that, she pulled Ji Tianqing up the stairs and walked towards the entrance of the temple. The Silver Moon Priest suppressed the anger in her heart and followed them into the temple. As for Moon Dream, she could not enter the temple without the permission of the High Priest. She could only wait outside the door with her clansmen and wait anxiously. Ji Tianqing and Jiao stepped through the door and entered the vast and bright temple. The temple, which had a radius of 100 feet, was decorated with the unique features of the other clans. The floor was paved with marble and inlaid with all kinds of colorful gems to form mysterious patterns. 16 thick and sturdy pillars stood on both sides of the temple and were painted bright silver. The walls on both sides of the temple were carved with lifelike reliefs of all kinds of strange and rare spirit beasts. At least a few thousand spirit beasts were facing the north of the temple and bowing with sincerity. And in the north of the temple, there was a tall altar. At the top of the altar, there was a statue of a spirit beast that was 100 feet tall. It was a spirit fox that was silver in color and looked very lifelike. Its appearance was majestic and its appearance was demonic. Its aura was mysterious and ethereal, and it even had a hint of an immortal spirit. Without a doubt, this spirit fox statue was the ancestor that the Moon Fox clan worshipped. Originally, this statue was made of special materials and had a powerful divine formation around it, so it should be glowing brightly. But now, the entire statue was dim and lifeless, like an ordinary stone. It was as if all the spirit chi and divine power had disappeared. There was a ball of icy blue light lying quietly on the shoulder of the spirit fox statue. Ji Tianqing knew that it was Qian Yu. It was curled up into a ball and lying on the shoulder of the statue. It was sleeping soundly and was even snoring rhythmically. A wry smile appeared on Ji Tianqing's face as he thought to himself, Isn't this damned stupid fox usually quite sly? After causing such a huge mess, not only did it not escape from the temple, it even dared to sleep on the statue. How am I supposed to explain this?
Even though this was what he thought, he could guess that there had to be a reason for this.
He released his divine sense and carefully examined Qianyu for a moment before discovering something. There was a fist-sized silver ball of light in Qianyu's body, which was exuding divine power at the same rhythm as its breathing. The vast divine power surged into its body and quickly strengthened its body and soul. With its current strength, it was unable to withstand such terrifying divine power, so it had fallen unconscious. Ji Tianxing heaved a sigh of relief upon seeing this. At the very least, Qianyu was safe for the time being. Chapter 1647. To Ji Tianxing, as long as nothing happened to Qianyu, everything would be fine. But the Silver Moon Priestess's face didn't look too good. Her anger was getting worse and worse. Not only did Qianyu swallow the god stone, but he was also sleeping on top of the statue. This was an insult to the Moon Fox clan's ancestors. The Silver Moon Priestess couldn't hold back her anger any longer. She glared at Ji Tianxing and asked, "Young master, please give my clan a reasonable explanation." This. Ji Tianxing hesitated for a moment. He looked around and finally fixed his eyes on the tall statue of the fox god. He carefully observed the statue, sizing it up from head to toe. Suddenly, his eyes flashed and he had an idea. The Silver Moon Priestess saw that he was silent and became even angrier. She asked coldly, "Your pet has caused such a big trouble. Don't you feel sorry for it? If that's the case, then don't blame me for not giving you face. Men, take down the demonic beast that blasphemes the ancestors' dignity." At this point, the Silver Moon Priestess couldn't care less about Jiujiu's presence. She also didn't care that Ji Tianxing was Jiujiu's friend. If she didn't take down the demonic beast, she wouldn't be able to face the people of the Moon Fox clan. Hearing her order, 4 guards in silver armor immediately flew up to the altar to capture the sleeping Qianyu. "Wait!" Ji Tianxing finally spoke. He waved his hand and stopped the 4 guards in their tracks. He looked at the Silver Moon Priestess with a serious expression and shouted, "Silver Moon Priestess, you are the leader of the Moon Fox clan. How can you be so stupid? How disappointing!" "What?" The Silver Moon Priestess was stunned. She stared at him coldly. Jiujiu and the 4 guards were also stunned. They didn't understand what was going on. Ji Tianxing put his hands behind his back and said proudly, "Silver Moon Priestess, do you know what it means to worship the Lord Yi? You keep saying that the Moon Fox clan has been worshipping the ancestor god for generations, treating the Divine Fox clan as their lifelong faith and not allowing anyone to profane it. But now the ancestral god had appeared, and the fox god had come to the Moon Fox tribe. Yet all of you turned a blind eye to it and couldn't even recognize the descendant of the first god. Aren't you ashamed?" The Silver Moon Priest was stunned by his words, and his body stiffened on the spot. "What did you say? Is that demonic beast the ancestor god that my clan has worshipped for generations? Ha! Do you know what kind of punishment you will have to bear for speaking nonsense and slandering our ancestors?" Obviously, the Silver Moon Priest thought that Ji Tianxing was just making things up to help Qianyu. She didn't believe Ji Tianxing's nonsense at all. She turned her head to look at Jiujiu, cupped her hands and bowed. She said in a serious tone, "Your Highness, this young master has slandered and blasphemed the ancestors of our race. Please forgive me for being unable to forgive him. Now, Silver Moon is going to capture him and punish him in public." The Silver Moon Priest could not take it anymore. Even if Jiujiu was present, he would immediately order for Ji Tianxing to be arrested and punished in public. Jiujiu did not expect things to turn out this way. She hesitated. But she only hesitated for a moment before shaking her head. "Silver Moon Priest, I don't think Tianxing would spout nonsense. He must have his reasons for saying this. Why don't you give him a chance to explain himself? If he really did offend the ancestors of the Moon Fox clan, I will not protect him." Since Jiujiu had spoken, the Silver Moon Priest could only nod and agree. "All right, I'd like to see how he can justify himself." The Silver Moon Priest glared at Ji Tianxing, his eyes cold and sharp. Ji Tianxing's expression did not change. He still had that mysterious look on his face. He said in a low and serious tone,
It was a coincidence that I came to the kingdom of God.
It was even more of a coincidence that I followed Her Highness Jojo to the Moonfox clan. But I believe that there is a thread of fate that led us to this place. Perhaps the decline of the Moonfox clan and the piety of worshipping the ancestors of the Moonfox clan moved the heavens and gave us the opportunity to manifest our ancestors. That's right. That little ice-blue beast is my pet and companion. Its name is Qian Yu. And its origin is the legendary heavenly fox. When the Silver Moon Priest heard this, he frowned and his eyes became complicated. Jojo blinked her big bright eyes and looked at him expectantly. She had a vague premonition that Ji Tianqing was mysterious and extraordinary. Even his pet was not simple. Ji Tianqing pointed at the ground and said in a serious tone, "From the moment Qian Yu and I stepped into the Moonfox clan's territory, we sensed a special aura. To Qian Yu, there was a mysterious magical power that attracted it. It was like a family member calling it home. So, in a moment of excitement, it followed the call of the mysterious magical power and barged into this temple. As for what happened after that, it was all logical. Because it is the descendant of the Moonfox clan's ancestors." These impassioned words were powerful and resonant, causing the blood of the 4 silver-armored guards to boil with passion. Even Jojo was affected by Ji Tianqing's words, and a smile appeared on her small face. She was deeply gratified and expectant. The Silver Moon Priest's expression also changed. She was bewildered and hesitant. She looked at Ji Tianqing and then at Qian Yu, who was curled up in a ball. In the end, she shook her head and said in a low voice, "This is only your one-sided story, and it is an exaggeration." According to the records of my clan's history, the ancestors of the Moonfox clan disappeared thousands of years ago. My clan's people have searched the entire Shenwu continent, but they have not found any traces of the ancestors, let alone their descendants. No matter what you say, I will not believe it. How can your pet be the descendant of my clan's ancestors? Ji Tianqing suddenly smiled. His smile was profound and unfathomable. That's right. There are no traces of the Moonfox clan's ancestors on Shenwu continent, but Qian Yu did not come from Shenwu continent. Jojo hurriedly nodded when she heard this. Silver Moon Priest, I can testify to this. The Silver Moon Priest fell silent. She looked at Ji Tianqing with a complicated expression and then at Qian Yu, who was curled up in a ball. Her emotions were in a mess, and she became even more hesitant. At this point, Ji Tianqing pointed at the fox god statue and said, "Silver Moon Priest, take a good look at your ancestors. Count how many tails they have." The Silver Moon Priest frowned and said in an unhappy tone, "My clan has worshipped the ancestors for generations, and I have served them for more than 100 years. How can I not know this? The ancestors are the noblest of foxes, and they have 12 tails." Ji Tianqing's lips curled up into a smile. He stretched out his hand and shot out a golden light, grabbing the sleeping Qian Yu. Chapter 1648. Ji Tianqing's words stunned the Silver Moon Priestess and Jojo. The two of them stared at Qian Yu and counted its big, furry tail. The next moment, both of their faces changed. Qian Yu's icy blue furry tails almost covered half of its body. The number of tails was not too many and not too few. There were exactly 12 of them. Jojo's eyes widened in shock as she exclaimed, "There really are 12 tails. It's exactly the same as the fox god statue." The Silver Moon Priest was also dumbfounded. He stared blankly for a long time without coming back to his senses. She could not believe her own eyes. Although she wanted to convince herself that it was just a coincidence. But Qian Yu not only had 12 tails, it also looked exactly like the fox god statue. How could this be a coincidence? Absolutely not. Although she could not accept this fact, she could not convince herself to deny it. Not only was the Silver Moon Priestess stunned, the 4 silver-armored guards also widened their eyes in shock. They could not believe that the fox god that they saw as a god had appeared in front of them alive. This was just too surreal. It was as if one day, an old man with a white beard suddenly appeared in front of you and said that he was the god that you had worshipped for your entire life. If it was anyone else, they would not be able to accept this shock, let alone believe it immediately. The temple was so quiet that even the sound of a pin dropping to the ground could be heard. Ji Tianqing was silent for a moment. When the Silver Moon Priestess and the rest recovered, he continued, "I know that you all do not want to believe this,
But this is the truth. You have no choice but to believe it.
All these years, I have been helping Qianyu to investigate its origins. Now the truth is out.
It is the descendant of the moon fox god, the noble and powerful heavenly fox.
Ji Tianxing said righteously. His tone was firm and sincere. Jiu was the first to recover.
She frowned and thought for a moment before nodding in agreement.
Silver Moon Priestess, I think Tianxing is right. I brought him for a stroll in the kingdom today and accidentally came here. Also, this heavenly fox called Qianyu is exactly the same as the fox god statue. Even if it swallowed the divine moonstone, there is nothing wrong with it. It can even absorb the power of the divine moonstone.
This means that even if Qianyu is not the moon fox god, it is deeply related to the moon fox god.
Jiu's reminder, the Silver Moon Priestess immediately came to her senses and nodded.
Qianyu is the descendant of the moon fox god. But it swallowed the divine moonstone, the moon divine moonstone.
Young Master Ji, I will not pursue Qianyu's crime of offending the ancestor gods. However, this divine stone is extremely important to our clan. Please return it to us. The priestess did not want to Qianyu as the moon fox god. Gods were gods because they were illusory. They could only be worshipped and not seen with their own eyes. Qianyu was the moon. She. Yu. Moon Chu Yu. Was. The her moon Yu? She. The Silver Moon Priestess wanted the divine moonstone back so that Ji Tianxing could leave with Qianyu. But Ji Tianxing would never agree to that. Silver Moon Priestess, you're being unreasonable. Qianyu is the descendant of the moon fox god. You have been worshipping the moon fox god for generations. Now that it is back, it is your piety that has moved the moon fox god. This is a joyous occasion for the moon fox god. As for the divine moonstone, it is the moon fox god's treasure. Or, it was left behind by the moon fox god. Qianyu swallowed the divine moonstone. You can say that it is returning to its rightful owner. Ji Tianxing looked at the Silver Moon Priest with a serious expression and analyzed the situation in a serious tone. The Silver Moon Priestess was dumbfounded. She stared at Su Ping, stuttering. You shameless bastard. I have never seen someone as unreasonable as you. You can't tell right from wrong. That divine moonstone is the moon fox god's treasure. Your pet swallowed the divine moonstone. How am I being unreasonable? Ji Tianxing handed Qianyu to the priestess. From now on, Qianyu is no longer my pet. It is the moon fox god. Didn't you say that the moon fox god has been worshipping the moon fox god for generations? It is time to test you. The moon fox god is here. Serve it well. With that, Su Ping turned around and was about to walk out of the temple. The Silver Moon Priestess held the sleeping Qianyu in her arms. She did not know what to do. If she really had to worship Qianyu as a deity, she wouldn't be willing even if she was beaten to death. But Ji Tianxing had thrown Qianyu to her. She did not know what to do. Helpless, she turned to look at Jiu and gave her a pleading look. Jiu pouted. She wanted to help, but she could not. The Silver Moon Priestess felt a headache coming on. She shouted to Ji Tianxing, "Young Master Ji, please wait." Ji Tianxing was just pretending to leave. He immediately stopped and turned around to ask, "What's wrong? Don't you want to serve the moon fox god? Is the moon fox god's devotion to the moon fox god all an act?" No. Of course not. The Silver Moon Priestess shook her head. Then you must serve it well. If you don't take good care of them and don't serve them well, then you'll be committing treason and offending them. Ji Tianxing said. He turned around and was about to leave. The Silver Moon Priest panicked and hurriedly shouted, "Young Master Ji, please forgive me for my previous offense. I was only anxious. I just want you to take your pet away. It does not matter if it is the descendant of our moon fox god. It is not suitable for it to stay here. However, the divine moonstone is very important to us. Please keep it." "I see." Ji Tianxing frowned. He thought for a moment and then shook his head. "I am afraid that is not possible. I just talked to Qianyu. It said that the divine moonstone is its ancestor's relic. It has begun to merge with its soul and blood. If you take the divine moonstone by force, you will kill Qianyu. It is the descendant of our moon fox god. It will be our future guardian. Are you sure you want to kill it? Ah! The silver moon priestess was stunned. She murmured in disbelief. How can this be? What should I do? Simple. Ji Tianqing said righteously. Qian, you can stay with the divine moon stone. You can serve it well and help it grow into the moon fox god. Chapter 1649. Ji Tianqing's two choices made the silver moon priestess feel extremely aggrieved. She didn't want to accept either choice. If she could turn back time, she would rather offend Jiu than let Ji Tianqing and Qian Yu enter Mount Yaoyu. Unfortunately, it had already happened and there was no turning back. Young Master Ji, is there no third choice? The silver moon priestess frowned at Ji Tianqing, her eyes full of pleading. Ji Tianqing shook his head with a regretful expression. I'm sorry, I have no choice. The silver moon priestess lowered her head in silence. After a long consideration, she made up her mind. In that case, I choose to let Qian Yu and the divine stone stay. Obviously, she would rather leave Qian Yu in Mount Yaoyu than lose the divine stone. Ji Tianqing seemed to have expected her to make this choice. He nodded calmly. Since the silver moon priestess has made her decision, then so be it. But I have to remind you that Qian Yu has never left my side. If I'm not by its side, it won't be used to it and its temper will be very bad. With its temper, it will most likely tear down this temple. After all, this temple is dedicated to it. It will also destroy the entire Mount Yaoyu, destroy all the buildings, and even beat up the people of the Moon Fox clan. In addition, it is still growing and needs to consume a large amount of spiritual stones and pills every day. If you can't satisfy it, it will become violent. Before Ji Tianqing could finish, the silver moon priestess's scalp went numb and her face turned ugly. Images of Qian Yu's crazy destruction kept appearing in her mind. The more she thought about it, the more she shuddered. Ji Tianqing laughed in his heart, but he still said seriously, Silver Moon Priest, these are all possible scenarios. You must be mentally prepared. No matter what, please remember that Qian Yu is the guardian of the Moon Fox clan. You must serve it devoutly and satisfy all its requests. You must not hurt it. Otherwise, you will be disobeying the ancestors and will be punished by the heavens. In the end, she didn't even wait for Ji Tianqing to finish before shouting, Stop! Young Master Ji, please take it away. The peace and tranquility of our Moon Fox clan was not easy to come by. I don't want our home to be destroyed. After saying that, she threw Qian Yu to Ji Tianqing as if she was throwing away a hot potato. With a wave of his hand, Ji Tianqing kept Qian Yu back into his sleeve and into the sword world. He looked at the Silver Moon Priest with a face full of regret and said in a helpless tone, Sigh, Silver Moon Priest, it seems that your faith is not devout enough. I've read in books that there are many ancient races that worship certain gods. Every year, they will hold a sacrifice to the gods. In order to show their devout faith, not only did they spend a lot of effort, they even used up the entire clan's financial resources to hold a sacrifice. In fact, they would even choose a few virgin boys and girls, kill them and sacrifice them to the gods. No, no, no. Absolutely not. The Silver Moon Priest's face paled as he waved his hands. Young Master Ji, I've also heard of those legends. They are all ancient and evil races. The gods they believed in were evil gods. Our Moon Fox clan does not fight with the world and yearns for peace and tranquility. We would never do such a thing. You should take Qian Yu away. At the end, the Silver Moon Priest's tone was full of helplessness. His heart was already dead. Ji Tianqing nodded slightly and pointed to the people outside the temple. He asked, How do you plan to explain this to the people? This. The Silver Moon Priest was speechless again and fell into silence. Ji Tianqing said seriously, Isn't that simple? Just pass on what I said to everyone, word for word. The people of the Moon Fox clan have been worshipping the ancestors for generations. Their devout faith has touched the ancestors and made them manifest. The descendants of the ancestors have come to the mortal world and come to the Moon Summoning Mountain to retrieve the Moon Summoning Divine Stone. This means that the ancestors have received everyone's faith. However, the ancestors will bless the Moon Fox clan to be peaceful and prosperous. After a few hundred years, the descendants of the ancestors will grow into the new gods and protect the Moon Fox clan forever. After he finished speaking, there was silence in the temple. The Silver Moon Priest and the 4 silver-armored guards all stared at him with their mouths agape, stunned on the spot. Jojo was also taken aback. She covered her mouth and laughed. She even sent a telepathic message to Ji Tianqing. Tianqing, you were acting like a preacher in the theocracy just now. Ji Tianqing rolled his eyes and asked, are you saying that I'm a swindler? Ahem. Jojo glared at him and said seriously, don't mention the word swindler. It is taboo in the theocracy. Ji Tianqing just remembered that martial god Taihao was the Lord God of the 6 kingdoms. The theocracy had sent many preachers to spread the name of the Lord God in the various kingdoms and guide the people to worship the Lord God. The word, swindler, was full of negative connotations and it was indeed damaging to martial god Taihao's reputation. At this time, the Silver Moon Priest weighed the pros and cons for a moment before nodding his head. Now that things have come to this, we can only do as young Master Ji says. Sigh.
The Silver Moon Priest stared at the 4 silver-armored guards and ordered, don't you dare say a word about what happened just now. Otherwise, I will punish you according to the rules of the tribe. The 4 silver-armored guards kept quiet out of fear. They quickly bowed and said, yes, young master.
The Silver Moon Priest was relieved. Surrounded by the 4 silver-armored guards, she walked out of the temple. Ji Tianqing and Jojo looked at each other and followed the Silver Moon Priest out of the temple. As soon as they reached the gate of the temple, they were surrounded by more than 200 Moon Fox tribesmen. The Moon Fox clansmen were all agitated and filled with righteous indignation. Many of them were waving their fists and shouting, asking the Silver Moon Priest to punish the bastard who blasphemed the Lord God. The Silver Moon Priest waved her hand and signaled for everyone to quiet down.
Then, she said solemnly, what happened just now was not because someone offended the Lord God. It was because the Lord God had manifested himself.
It was the piety of the Moon Fox tribesmen that moved the Lord God and caused the miracle to happen. This is a joyous occasion. The descendant of the Lord God has come to the mortal world and come to our moon-gathering mountain. Although she said it was a joyous occasion, she could not bring herself to smile. The Moon Fox tribesmen listened carefully to the Silver Moon Priest's words and were enlightened. After the Silver Moon Priest finished speaking, the people were even more surprised. They all cheered and clapped their hands in joy. In fact, many emotional people even knelt down to worship the temple in an extremely pious manner. Everyone wanted to see for themselves what the descendant of the Lord God looked like. Chapter 1650. The members of the Moon Fox clan were cheering and praying to the temple, deeply grateful for its help. The simple people danced and sang excitedly. They were discussing how to hold a grand banquet to celebrate this joyous occasion. The Silver Moon Priest saw this and was so heartbroken that she could not speak. She said a few perfunctory words to the people and hurriedly left the temple. Ji Tianqing and Jojo took the opportunity to leave the Moon Summoning Mountain quietly. The 2 of them rode on the Pegasus and flew across the sky as fast as lightning, returning to Taihao City. On the way back, Jojo kept looking at Ji Tianqing with a strange expression and snickered from time to time. Ji Tianqing sat upright on the back of the Pegasus. He originally wanted to maintain a straight face and maintain a serious appearance. But after Jojo glanced at him a few more times, he could not hold it in anymore. Jojo, why do you keep looking at me? Is there something on my face? Jojo covered her mouth and snickered again. There was a cunning look in her big bright eyes. I'm thinking, are you still the Tianqing I know? What do you mean? Ji Tianqing raised his eyebrows. Jojo counted with her fingers and said, I'm thinking, what made an honest, kind and principled young genius become a cunning and scheming villain? Huh. I don't know what you're talking about. Ji Tianqing shook his head and looked away. Jojo turned around and stared into his eyes. She smiled and said, actually, you didn't know the relationship between Qian Yu and the Moon Fox tribe at first. And you weren't sure if Qian Yu was the descendant of the Moon Fox tribe's ancestor. You saw that the divine stone of the moon was extraordinary and contained powerful divine power. It was very beneficial to Qian Yu, so you deliberately made up a lie. You retreated in order to advance and deliberately said that you wanted to keep Qian Yu in the Moon Fox tribe. When the Silver Moon Priest agreed, you deliberately threatened her and forced her to give up the divine stone of the moon and let you and Qian Yu go. Humph, the Moon Fox tribe is simple and kind. They are not good at scheming. You can fool them, but you can't fool me. The Silver Moon Priest was shocked by the series of events, and his mind was unstable. That was why he fell into your trap. When she wakes up, she'll definitely settle the score with you. After hearing Jiujiu's words, Ji Tianqing had no choice but to face reality. He smiled awkwardly and said, "All right, I can't hide anything from you. You are really smart. However, by the time the Silver Moon Priestess comes looking for me, I will already be long gone from God's kingdom. Where can she find me?" Jiujiu pouted and said worriedly, "If the Silver Moon Priestess can't find you, she will definitely go to the 100 Tribes Alliance to ask for an explanation. At that time, this matter will alarm God Father. If Father God knows that I brought you to the Moon Fox clan and caused this matter, he will definitely punish me and forbid me to go to the Moon Fox clan again." Ji Tianqing revealed an apologetic look and comforted her. "I'm really sorry about this matter, but you are the Divine Lord's most beloved little princess, he won't be too harsh on you." Jiujiu was still a little unhappy. She pouted and said, "But, I can't go to the Moon Fox clan to taste the moon scar pastries anymore." "That's simple." Ji Tianqing thought for a moment and said seriously, "In the future when I travel the world, if I come across any delicious food, I will bring back 100 servings as compensation." Yes, that's a good idea." Jiujiu smiled and nodded. "Tianqing, you promised me, you can't go back on your words." "Don't worry, I won't lie to you." Ji Tianqing smiled and patted her head gently. Jiujiu pouted and said unhappily, "Humph. Don't touch my head. Do you think I'm a child? I'm much older than you." All right. Ji Tianqing nodded and couldn't help but reach out and touch her head a few more times. Jiujiu stared at him speechlessly and pouted, pretending to be angry. Ji Tianqing smiled even more happily. 2 hours later, the Pegasus returned to Taihao City and landed in Rui Palace. Ji Tianqing returned to his residence and entered a secret chamber to meditate. As he meditated, he released his consciousness from time to check on Qian Yu's situation. Qian Yu had been sleeping in peaceful Soil City in the Sword World. The size of the divine moonstone had shrunk slightly, but it still emitted a mysterious silver light and fluctuated with powerful divine power. Qian Yu's bloodline and soul had fused with the divine stone's power and were rapidly strengthening. Ji Tianqing could vaguely sense that Qian Yu would soon break through to the primordial spirit realm, and the divine power contained in the divine moonstone would allow it to reach the 6th level of the primordial spirit realm or even higher. That divine moonstone contains terrifying divine power. Other spiritual beasts and human warriors can't devour and refine it, but Qian Yu can refine it. However, Qian Yu was able to refine it without a hitch. The energy fluctuations and attributes of the summoning moon divine stone were perfectly compatible with it. From the looks of it, I didn't lie to the Silver Moon Priest. Qian Yu really has the bloodline of the Moon Fox clan's ancestor. Originally, he had planned to ask the Silver Moon Priest about the Moon Fox clan's ancestor. But the Silver Moon Priest was in a terrible mood and he didn't want to embarrass himself, so he left quietly. Now that he had nothing to do, he drove his primordial spirit into Kenshin's tomb and entered the Heavenly Sutra Chamber through the first tombstone. He browsed through the books in the Heavenly Sutra Chamber, looking for information related to the Moon Fox clan. Hard work pays off. He spent half a day searching through thousands of ancient books and finally found a book related to the Moon Fox clan. This ancient book mentioned the Moon Fox clan, but it was only a brief introduction of about 1,000 words. According to the book, the Moon Fox clan was one of the ancient clans. They had once prospered and established a huge empire. A portion of the Moon Fox clan's bloodline originated from the ancient divine beast, the Sky Fox. Therefore, the Moon Fox clan viewed the Sky Fox as their ancestor and worshipped it devoutly. The Sky Fox had always protected the Moon Fox clan and taught them many martial arts and spells. That was why the Moon Fox clan prospered. However, in the ancient war that happened 30,000 years ago, the Sky Fox clan participated in the war and fell one after another. The Moon Fox clan also followed their ancestor to participate in the ancient war. In the end, they suffered a crushing defeat and were almost exterminated. In the tens of thousands of years after that, the Sky Fox clan's bloodline gradually withered and it was difficult to pass down the bloodline of the Sky Fox clan. The Moon Fox clan also became weaker and was bullied and ostracized by other clans. They had no choice but to move from place to place. More than 1,000 years ago, the Sky Fox clan completely disappeared. The The Moon Fox clan lost their last hope and their situation became even more miserable and helpless. They encountered danger several times and were almost exterminated. Fortunately, martial god Taihao was merciful and saved the Moon Fox clan. He settled them in the Heavenly Kingdom and allowed the Moon Fox clan to survive. When Ji Tianqing finished reading the contents of the book, he understood the whole story. But a question popped up in his mind and he couldn't get rid of it. Since the Sky Fox clan disappeared more than 1,000 years ago, why did it disappear without a trace? Then why did it appear 100 years ago? And why did it appear in the Tianxian continent? Chapter 1651. Ji Tianqing could not figure out the Heavenly Fox clan for the time being, so he had to put it aside for the time being. He calmed down and cultivated, silently improving his strength.
Now that he had reached the peak of the 7th level of the Essence Soul Realm, he could reach the 8th level of the Essence Soul Realm as long as he broke through the bottleneck. He wanted to use the majestic spiritual energy and divine power of the Divine Kingdom to break through the bottleneck of the realm. However, the Essence Soul Realm was already an unfathomable realm of martial arts.
How difficult was it to break through the bottleneck? Ji Tianqing cultivated in seclusion in the secret chamber for 6 consecutive days, but he still could not break through the bottleneck. These 6 days of cultivation only deepened his cultivation and strengthened his martial arts foundation. Other than that, he did not gain anything.
Until the morning of the 7th day, a guard came to the secret chamber and knocked on the door.
Ji Tianqing had no choice but to end his cultivation and get up to walk out of the secret chamber. He saw 2 people standing at the door of the secret chamber. One of them was the guard, and the other was Jojo. Jojo was wearing a light green dress and exquisite hair accessories on her head. She looked exceptionally cute.
However, her expression and eyes were not relaxed at all.
There was even a hint of worry. "Jojo, why are you looking for me?" Ji Tianqing greeted her. Jojo hurriedly pulled him out and explained as they walked, "Tianqing, the Silver Moon Priestess has indeed come to Taihao City. She is now in the 100 Clan Alliance looking for someone to judge. I just got the news, so I hurried to inform you. Before the people of the 100 Races Alliance begin their investigation, you should hide first." Then she added, "Of course, this is not because I am afraid of trouble. I just don't want to get involved in unnecessary trouble. Furthermore, the Heavenly Fox clan is so pure and kind. I don't want to hurt the Silver Moon Priestess." Ji Tianqing nodded to show that he understood. "Yes, I have already planned and mentally prepared for this. Since the Silver Moon Priestess is here, it is time for me to leave." Seeing that he had no intention of resisting, Jojo heaved a sigh of relief and said, "Tianqing, go pack up. I will wait for you here." Ji Tianqing shook his head and said with a smile, "I don't have anything to pack. I can set off now." "All right, then I'll send you to the space-time tunnel now." Jojo ordered the guards to prepare a carriage. When the 2 of them walked into the courtyard, an exquisite and luxurious large carriage had already stopped in front of them. This carriage was Jojo's personal carriage. It was incomparably luxurious and noble. It was pulled by 4 spotlessly white Pegasi. The coachman was the captain of the Imperial Bodyguards. After Ji Tianqing and Jojo boarded the carriage, the coachman drove the carriage away from Rui Palace and headed towards the Eastern District. About half an hour later, the carriage passed through a dozen streets and stopped in front of a majestic tower. This white pagoda, which was 100 feet tall, was one of the few iconic buildings in the city. It was called the Space-Time Pagoda. The area within 1,000 feet of the Tower of Time and Space was a restricted area guarded by hundreds of temple guards. Ordinary people were not allowed to approach. This place was heavily guarded, and the giant tower exuded a sacred and majestic aura. Ji Tianqing could vaguely feel that there was an extremely powerful array set up inside the space-time pagoda. It exuded waves of invisible divine power. After Jojo showed the token to the commander of the Imperial Bodyguards, she brought Ji Tianqing into the space-time pagoda. The 2 of them climbed up the winding stone stairs. After about half an hour, they arrived at the top floor. The top floor was a vast hall. The floor was paved with rare jade and inlaid with all kinds of gems and divine stones. In the middle of the hall, there was an ancient altar with a radius of more than 300 feet. The altar flickered with a dense white light and exuded a majestic divine power fluctuation. 4 white-robed elders with sage-like demeanor guarded the altar. They were meditating with their eyes closed. Jiao pointed at the altar and introduced it to Ji Tianqing. Tianqing, that is the altar to travel through space-time. In a while, I will let the 4 emissaries open the altar to open the space-time tunnel. Once you pass through the space-time tunnel, you will be able to travel billions of miles in an instant and reach the ruins of God. However, you must remember that after you reach the ruins of God, you must be careful. You must not be reckless. You must find a safe place to stay and wait for the people from Mount God Bestowment to arrive. Then you can meet them. Ji Tianqing nodded to show that he understood. Jiao was relieved and went to negotiate with the 4 white-robed emissaries. A moment later, the 4 white-robed emissaries followed her orders and joined forces to open the altar's array. Suddenly, the ancient altar began to operate and lit up with a dazzling golden light. The sacred golden light exuded a terrifying divine power fluctuation and gathered at the top of the altar. It gradually condensed into a 3-meter-tall golden light door. The style of the light door was simple and sacred. Behind the door was pitch black and incomparably mysterious. Ji Tianqing saw that the space-time tunnel had been opened and bowed to Jiao. Jiao, then I will take my leave. We will meet again if fate wills it. Jiao was stunned. She frowned and asked, Tianqing, are you really not planning to come back? Then what you promised me before, does it still count? Ji Tianqing reached out and patted her head. He smiled and said, the road ahead is long. Everything is unknown. Perhaps I will come back one day. No matter what, I will not forget what I promised you. I will definitely do it. Jiao's mood became even more depressed. She pouted and said, if you go back on your words, I will never trust you again. Ji Tianqing did not say anything. He just smiled and waved at her. Then, he stepped into the space-time light door. Swoosh! In the next moment, the space-time light door flashed with golden light. Ji Tianqing's figure disappeared. The 4 white-robed emissaries gradually stopped, and the space-time light door gradually dissipated. Jiao stood in place and stared blankly at the space-time light door dissipating. After a long time, she turned and left. Swoosh! Ji Tianqing only saw a flash of light in front of his eyes. He left the boundless darkness and came to an unfamiliar place. He appeared on a 10,000 feet tall mountain. He stood on a huge black rock at the peak of the mountain. A biting cold wind blew in his face, causing his clothes to flutter and his long hair to dance wildly. He looked around calmly and observed the terrain of this area. He saw that the sky was gloomy and filled with endless leaden clouds. There was also a whistling cold wind that wreaked havoc. There was not a trace of green on the bare mountain peak. Not even a small tree or grass could be seen. There was only grayish-brown soil and bare rocks everywhere. The entire mountain under his feet was a withered gray. It was as if there was a dead aura around it. Around the mountain, there were 10,000 feet deep ancient valleys, long and narrow ravines, and undulating mountain ranges. However, there was no green forest or vegetation within a radius of a few hundred miles. Heaven and earth were filled with a thick chill. There was also an ancient and heavy aura. You're tuning in to the Xueqi's Martial Arts Saga YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.